The story begins in a small forest area. Three masked men surrounded a man who was protecting his comrades. Suddenly, a young boy kicked one of them, after which the unknown man fell to the ground. The man with the katana asked who the boy was. The boy smiled and said he was just an ordinary 8-year-old boy passing by. They were taken aback. 100 years before, there was panic in the arena. A beastman was shouting at Master Edelphus not to lose consciousness under any circumstances. Another man was telling Dion to quickly use healing magic while the girl was worried. The man smiled and told the others not to be so harsh. The beastman asked why the blood wouldn't stop flowing. The man said that it happened with age. He asked if they had been able to defeat the monster of disaster and if there were any other signs of its revival. They said that there was no such thing because the master had wiped out all of his presence from the face of the earth with his magic. The young guy with glasses shouted that the master had not yet taught him this magic. The man laughed heavily and said that it was just a simple improvisation. He said that since the boy had already seen it, he would also be able to use it on his own in the future. The boy shouted at the master not to dare to say such nonsense. Mage Milt was full of talent, determination, and with a sincere heart the master poured all his magical knowledge into him. Even without his mentorship, he will be able to surpass the master as a magician. Warrior Zenobia, the little girl who hated ghosts, grew up to become a warrior that people can call a holy sword. Healer Dion, he became such a good healer that he is even called the favorite child of the god of water. Hero Regina, she became strong enough to be called a hero, but she still cried constantly. The master said that they, his proud disciples, would now be on their own. She declared that even without him, they would be fine. Dion exclaimed that this was not so, for they still needed their master. The man looked at them and thought that his students had grown up wonderfully, and he was absolutely sure that they would continue to serve for the good of this world. He closed his eyes and thought that he was lucky because the place where he was dying was blessed by his beloved disciples. He was calm because he had a pretty good life. Suddenly, he heard an unknown voice thanking Mr. Edelphus for his hard work. The man was a little confused. He started turning around and asking who it was. He desperately tried to find the source of this voice. The stranger said that she was a beautiful and kind goddess. She said that Edelphus, being a human, was able to defeat the monster of disaster. She came there to celebrate his contribution to humanity and welcome him as a new god. She asked him if he had any regrets. The man was a little discouraged about becoming a god. He had no children, but his students grew up to be great men and women. He had nothing to regret, for it was a wonderful 120 years of his life. However, one thought was spinning in his head. He said that he had just killed the monster of disaster. Edelphus worriedly asked if he had managed to wipe it off the face of the earth. The goddess thought about it. A few moments later, she said that the monster of disaster was one of the apostles of God, so it was not so easy to destroy. Edelphus exclaimed in amazement. He asked the goddess if this meant that everything he had worked for his entire life had been in vain. The goddess continued and said that it was amazing that he had been able to do so much, being only a man. She added that in addition, the monster of disaster would temporarily fall asleep and would not disturb people. She suggested that they discuss the rest when he became a god. He did not know what to say because the monster of disaster was alive. It was an enemy of humanity, but more than that, killing it was the only goal Edelphus had spent his entire life on. He still couldn't believe that it had survived after all that. He put his hand to his face and said that it was very annoying. The man called loudly to the goddess, even if she was a devil. He told her to listen to his wish. The girl happily noted that he finally accepted her as a goddess. A girl with a pleasant appearance and a gentle smile on her face asked him if he had thought about what kind of god he would become. Edelphus immediately exclaimed that he wanted to kill the monster of disaster, and that was the only reason he was ready to become a god. The girl looked away and said that there were some restrictions. The man asked in confusion what kind of restrictions, after which he also asked her to explain everything in more detail. She said that the monster of disaster is a god, and to be precise, it is a former god who has become a fallen cursed beast, still possessing the power of a god, retaining its power befitting a fallen god. If divine forces collide on Earth, the planet simply won't withstand it. That's why the gods couldn't interfere directly. They can only act through earthly inhabitants. Edelphus said that one of his students was the favorite child of the water god. The girl agreed and said that he had caught the essence of what she had told. She added that all of Edelphus's students were the beloved children of the gods. Regina was the favorite child of the holy goddess, Milt was the favorite of the god of magic, and Zenobia was loved by the god of swords. Edelphus asked in amazement if his students were the favorites of the gods. The goddess proudly said that Edelphus himself was her favorite child. The man was a little embarrassed and only agreed with her. The goddess cleared her throat a little and then, with a slight blush on her face, tried to collect together everything she needed to say. The next moment she came closer and politely told him that it would be better if he were reborn not as a god, but as a man. Right after that she said that there were only 3 conditions. The man asked a little tensely what these conditions were. She explained that the first condition was that after reincarnation he should not commit any acts that would go against the gods. Edelphus immediately said that he would not do such a thing. The second condition was that at the end of his second life he would definitely become a god. After that, the man realized that this was inevitable for him. The girl also told about the third condition, which was not even a condition as such, but rather a manifestation of parental care. Hearing this, Edelphus was a little surprised. The goddess said that before reincarnation he would have to train in heaven, because without this monster of disaster he would definitely not be able to defeat it. Edelphus smiled and said that if he did become stronger, then let everything be as she said. The goddess opened the door slightly, from which an incredibly bright light was coming. She said that the flow of time in heaven and earth may be different, and during the time before reincarnation he needs to reveal all his hidden potential. Many silhouettes of various creatures could be seen in the doorway. From that moment on, Edelphus spent all his time training hard with the gods. This went on for an insanely long time, after which he was finally reborn. In a large house stood a boy who was a descendant of a distant relative of Edelphus. The boy was 8 years old and his name was Will Worms. He diligently wiped the windows and thought about how the memory of his previous life had suddenly awakened last month, when he had just turned 8 years old. Now he was a follower of God, like an apostle. The goddess had told him earlier that as an apostle of the gods, it was important for him to behave with dignity. He thought that she had actually said something like that. If he trains from now on, he will be at his prime when the monster of disaster is reborn. It will also play a role that he has greatly increased the limit of his hidden abilities in training with the gods. 3. He was also learning effective methods of improvement. He thought that now he was doing both cleaning and training. Suddenly, someone kicked him hard and asked what he was doing there, after which he called the boy names. 2 young men stood before him. One of them, the taller, began to curse, asking why his father had taken in someone so useless. It was a child of the main line of the Worms Danon family. He said that Will was insulting their name. Next to him stood another boy from the main line named Ivan. Will looked at them and thought that they were from the main line, but he had never had children. He apologized to them and said that he would finish right away. He glanced at Danon out of the corner of his eye and thought about how these guys were descendants of his cousin. He supposed that this line must have become the main one after his death, and now they were boasting about becoming nobles. Noticing Will's gaze, Danon became quite angry and, looking up at the boy, asked how he dared to look at him like that. A grimace of intense anger appeared on his face and he smiled cruelly. He hit Will again, causing the boy to fall to the floor with a loud thud. Danon screamed loudly, asking the boy if he still didn't understand exactly what position he occupied in their home. Together with Ivan, they stood on different sides and began to kick Will and scream for him to die. The boy, meanwhile, curled up and covered his head with his hands. At that moment, the butler and the maid noticed this and were horrified. The butler turned to Mr. Danon and politely, but at the same time quite nervously asked the boy to stop what he was doing. He said with concern that Mr. Will would die if he continued doing this. Holding the boy by the hair, he lifted him up and with even greater anger, which made his face twist, he ordered them not to call the boy master because he did not deserve even that. The butler was confused and apologized to Danon. He continued to hit the boy and curse at him. He wanted to kill Will. At the same time, Will was surprisingly calm. He thought that, to be honest, Danon had not been able to give him even a single scratch. He thought it was time to end this concert because he didn't want to make the servant even more nervous about this situation. Will decided that now he would let Danon hit him and the guy would be quite satisfied with it. The moment Danon's fist almost touched Will's face, the boy quickly decided that he needed to cast a magical protection on his face. Quite quickly and deftly, he did what he planned. After that, it was important for him to take the body to the other side at the right moment. He did everything as he planned. Damon's fist crashed into the magical defense, after which Will seemed to fly to the side due to the strong blow. After the loud crash of Will hitting the floor, Damon smirked and asked Ivan if he saw what just happened. Ivan smiled and then said that his brother was just amazing. Immediately after they had satisfied their vanity, they, with loud laughter, spilled the dirty water in which Will had washed the rag and told him to clean up everything in that place. The boy raised his head a little and quietly agreed. As soon as the children of the main line left, the butler and maid immediately rushed to Will's side. The butler worriedly said that they could look at the boy's wounds right away. Will calmly told them not to worry because he was completely safe and sound. The butler still looked worriedly at the boy's face and said that this simply could not be. The next moment he was surprised. Will sat on the floor with a sweet smile. The butler couldn't believe his eyes because the boy had just been hit so hard. Will covered one eye and said that his father had taught him fighting techniques and that's why he wasn't hurt too badly. The maid and the butler could only stare at the boy in amazement. They sighed with relief and said that they understood, because this was what one would expect from the child whose parents were Mr. Kluge and Mrs. Maria. He said that they were both excellent martial artists. The butler told Will that he could leave the rest to them since the gentleman would not be there. Will wanted to object, but the maid said that it was simply impossible to force children to do hard work because in the future it could seriously affect their health. By this time, a couple more servants had arrived and were already cleaning up the mess left by the children. The butler, smiling, led Will into another room and respectfully told his master to rest. There Will was met by Will's sweet little sister, Saria Borms. She was riding their pet Run-Run. Will lifted the girl off the dog and asked with a smile if she had been good enough. With a wide smile, the girl said that she had been good. Then Will approached Run-Run and asked if he had been a good boy. The dog obediently lowered its head so that Will could pet the beautiful creature. Will picked up Saria and smiled as he thanked the servants for always looking after his precious little sister. The old woman said he didn't need to thank her. She was only happy to look after the daughter of Mr. Kluge and Mrs. Maria. She said that Mr. Kluge was such an outstanding person. He was extremely talented in magic and a very good leader. The girl sighed and said what would happen if only Mr. Kluge could be their master. The old woman yelled at the girl and told her to stop talking about it. She said that even walls have ears, so the girl should refrain from such statements. The maid immediately awkwardly apologized for her words. Will held Saria in his arms and thought about how their kind and sweet parents had died 2 years ago. Previously, he had heard rumors that his father and uncle had been arguing for a long time about who would be the head of the house. Eventually, the uncle married a girl from an influential house and took over the leading position and sent the father to a remote estate. The father died protecting the inhabitants of the territories under his control from magical monsters. They could no longer stay in that place and had to return with Saria to the estate. They were taken under the wing of the head of the Brahms house where they live to this day. However, in this house they were heavily loaded with hard work and at the same time they could not even feed the children properly. Memories from his past life recently returned to Will, and he of course could run away from there, but he did not want to leave his younger sister there. He kept thinking about how his students would accept him now, because after his death, the 4 of them created a council of sages that does everything to prevent the return of monsters to their world. Will also heard that they were running a mission organization that had even more authority and power than the king and even the head of the church. 100 years ago, all of his students were only about 20 years old, so it was not surprising that they were still alive. The boy asked the butler if he knew how he could meet the founders of the Council of Sages. The boy said that he thought that even the head of their house would have a hard time getting an audience with them. However, if the boy entered the School for Heroes and demonstrated outstanding academic results and joined the mission organization, he might succeed. Will asked what kind of School for Heroes this was. The butler said that it was a school organized by a council of sages. It was created to raise the next generation of heroes. The old lady said that the entrance exam was, of course, very difficult, but if the gentleman was accepted, the school would cover all the expenses and he would be able to live with his sister in the dormitory. The boy was surprised. The old woman said that even if he couldn't get into the School of Heroes, he could always try to pass the exams for the School of Sages or Knights. Will thought about it seriously. From his past life experience, both the Sage School and the Night School were only available to the elite, and now they were seen as backup options. He was so deep in his thoughts that he didn't even notice the servants calling him with interest. The butler asked delightedly whether the boy would pass the exam to the School of Heroes. The maid joyfully exclaimed that he would definitely be able to pass the School of Heroes because she did not have the slightest doubt. The boy became embarrassed and looked away, after which he said that whether he would pass or not was out of the question for now. First of all, he decided that it was important for him to test his strength in this exam. He asked if there was any age limit for this exam. The guys answered that, as a rule, there is none. Although all intelligent beings belong to humanoids, their life expectancy depends greatly on their race. The School for Heroes has a lot of graduates from the schools of sages and knights, and that's why there can be both very young students and older students there. Will said that all he had to do was get permission from the head of the house. He assumed that Danon and Ivan would try to play a dirty trick on him again. The butler assumed that there would be no problem with that. He explained that admission only required the consent of the applicant, even if he was a child. No one will go against the mission organization that runs the school. In fact, there are many children with a similar situation to Mr. Will, so the organization protects them from guardians in this way. Will said the organization had incredible authority. The butler said they would bring the boy the application forms without the other gentlemen suspecting anything. In fact, they had already begun to prepare everything secretly. He asked them to look after her, to which the servants agreed with great enthusiasm. Will patted his sister on the head and told her to behave well. He also told Run to look after her sister. Will waved to them and then left. The girl, with a smile on her face, told him to come back soon. After a while, Will was walking down a street full of different people. He thought about how they hadn't been fed properly today either. The boy walked along lost in his thoughts about catching some bird for Saria's dinner. After some time spent walking, he noticed that this gateway was deserted, and right there were the castle walls. At the end of the gateway, there was a good place where there were no people, and it was close to the wall. He approached and wondered if he could jump that high. Will concentrated to successfully concentrate the magic in his legs. Immediately after this, he pushed off the ground with great force, which allowed him to jump high enough to jump over the walls that separated the kingdom's territory. Even the guard who was supposed to guard the walls failed to notice such a clever trick. He only snored quietly, holding the weapon in his hands. Meanwhile, Will landed carefully. He did a small somersault, thanks to which he made almost no sound. He ran forward at a fast pace, happy that everything had gone so well since he didn't even have a single scratch on his body. He thought that he could finally see the result of those hard trainings with the gods. He looked up where he saw a bird calmly flying in some direction. Will picked up a small stone from the ground, after which he said out loud that he would concentrate the required amount of magic on his thumb. He looked at the bird again, carefully fixing his desired target. Using magic control, he threw the stone straight at the bird. Having covered a great distance, the stone hit the bird directly, after which the animal flew down. Will came over to pick up the bird, saying it was great practice for his skills. He smiled and already imagined how happy Saria would be. He knew very well how much his little sister loved poultry. This would be the third bird he would bring home for Saria. Suddenly, the boy heard some sounds. He turned around and wondered if someone was fighting nearby. He was sure he heard some noise. At this time, a battle was indeed taking place. A middle-aged man was fighting to protect his comrades. A young girl in a hat was healing a guy who was wearing massive armor. The man was holding his own against 4 masked strangers. The attacking strangers were holding daggers that they could handle with skill. The man was holding a large katana in his hands. He was saying that he was not going to give up so easily. The man, who was protecting his comrades, looked at the girl out of the corner of his eye and seriously told her to leave it to him and run away. In response, the girl said that if she did not treat them, they would all die. The man exclaimed that this was exactly what their enemies were trying to achieve. He looked at their comrades who were lying on the ground and could not speak from pain and said that he had not attacked them on purpose so that they would stop. The girl who sat and tried her best to heal her comrades said that even if that were the case, they would still be of absolutely no use if she did not heal them. Will, watching this, made some small conclusions. The boy noted that this man was far from stupid, but Will also noted that it seemed that the man would not be able to cope with these 3 enemies. From the information Will could see, he assumed the 9 people were the man's fallen companions. He wondered if the enemy would strike before they could escape. The wounded were telling the girl not to worry and to go. Suddenly, Will noticed that everything was not so simple. Suddenly, one of the masked attackers pointed his dagger at the girl who was treating her comrades. Noticing this, she became scared and screamed. The girl had no time or opportunity to dodge this attack. Suddenly, a man who had been in another place earlier rushed in and saved the girl. He parried the enemy's blow with his sword. Suddenly, he felt something very sharp which he could not expect. As it turned out, one of the attackers attacked the man from behind, stabbing him with a dagger. The man involuntarily screamed in pain. He immediately turned around and took the defensive, realizing that he had made a mistake. Will noticed that the attacker had attacked the man who was defending the girl at the time. He thought it was almost the same as a whole pack of wolves attacking a single bear. The man defending the girl said that the capital was very close and the girl should run to call for help. She hesitated and said that she simply could not run away from there. He turned slightly and told her that this would be the best option for all of them. He screamed at her to run from there and not look back. The girl became nervous, unable to answer anything because the man was right. She turned around silently and ran away, small tears forming in her eyes. The man turned back to his enemy to protect himself. As the girl was running away, one of the enemies decided to rush at her. He ran towards her, trying to stop the healer, but the man quickly appeared in the right place and stopped the enemy's attack. He shouted at the girl that she could trust him with this. The worried girl turned to see what had happened, and to her horror, she saw something that could be extremely dangerous for the man. She was dumbfounded when she saw that there was an enemy behind the man who was about to attack him with a dagger right in the back. She screamed loudly, trying to warn the man of the danger, but he no longer had enough time to dodge this attack. At the very last moment, Will emerged from the bushes and attacked the enemy. He kicked him in the face, which allowed him to send the stranger flying and save the man. The man himself, just like the girl, stopped, looking in shock at the boy who saved their lives. Will landed gracefully on the ground after his successful attack and slowly rose. He said that, of course, he did not know the essence of everything that was happening, but he would like to help them. The man asked in surprise who Will was. With a small smile on his face, the boy turned around and said that he was just an 8-year-old kid who happened to be passing by at the right moment. He immediately turned away and told the girl that she should focus on her treatment. The girl hesitated, trying to object for safety reasons. With a smile on his face, Will turned around and told her not to worry, as they certainly wouldn't be bothered by enemies. It was at that moment that one of the attackers attempted to strike the boy from behind while he was distracted by the conversation. Despite such a vile attack, Will calmly grabbed the enemy by the arm, which greatly surprised the masked man. He quickly and deftly managed to flip the enemy onto his back and hit him on the ground. He said he simply wouldn't let the enemy get in their way. Will slammed the enemy's head right into the ground, rendering him incapable of combat. The last attacker could only watch in silence as his 2 masked comrades were thrown into a pile, no longer in any condition to fight. He glared at Will, but he was very shocked by what he saw when he looked in that direction again. With a quick dash, Will reached his enemy and hit him in the face with his knee. The blow was so strong that the unknown man in the mask lost his balance and flew to the side. With this attack, Will was able to send the enemy to sleep, as well as break the stranger's mask. He definitely won this fight. Right after his trick, the boy was surprised by what he heard. Someone behind him was loudly cursing, calling someone a fool. He just looked in that direction silently. The man who had deftly finished off the enemies with his sword had already sheathed his weapon, because all the enemies were dead and lying on the ground. The man sat down on the floor and began to carefully tie up the enemies. He said that Will had helped him out and then politely thanked the boy for his help. Will only said that he was glad that he had been able to help them. He placed his hands on his hips and turned to take stock. He saw the girl putting all her strength into healing her comrades. He approached her and said that it seemed that she herself really needed treatment now. The worried and tired girl immediately exclaimed that this was not so. She looked at one of her comrades who was coughing up blood heavily and said that she had to heal them as soon as possible. Will looked at this and sighed thoughtfully. Right after that, he slightly closed his left eye and raised his hands. He told the girl to leave this job to him. He began to gather magic in his hands. The girl looked at him a little surprised, but did not object. Will raised his hands high and recited a spell in an unknown language, his eyes closed so as not to disturb him, his concentration intense. The next moment, a fairly large magic circle appeared around them, the area of which could collect all the wounded lying on the ground unconscious or without strength. Will's magic power began to rise up. The man and the girl looked at the magic power developing around them in amazement. They were unable to say anything. Will quickly opened his eyes, then waved his hand in front of him. He moved his hands forward. Then the man was amazed to see how all of his wounds began to rise up and disappear. The girl noticed this too. She looked at her hands in amazement, unable to believe that she had been cured. She quickly turned to the side to look at her comrades. There the girl saw how everyone who entered the territory of magic was healed, and all their wounds rose into the air along with Will's magical power. The man, who had been silent before, quietly said that it was some kind of miracle. His voice even trembled with surprise. The girl asked in amazement if he had really healed everyone. She honestly did not understand how he had been able to heal them all without even touching anyone. Will looked at everyone who was nearby. He remembered his student. Once upon a time, he had told him that if he practiced more, he would succeed. To this, the student had nervously replied that he could not heal people without touching them. Will looked at him and smiled. He said that he knew how to do it from the very beginning. Suddenly, he came to his senses and turned to the girl. He scratched his face awkwardly and looked away, then said that there was nothing unusual about it and she should forget about his words. She just looked at him silently, in shock. With a big smile on his face, the man said that Will had helped them all and he was their savior. He came a little closer, opening his arms. The man smiled and asked Will to let him thank the boy. Will still turned awkwardly and thanked the man, then said that he shouldn't thank him. He smiled sweetly and turned around, already getting ready to leave. He said that they didn't have to do that at all. After that, he waved his hand and wished them a safe journey. Immediately after that, he ran on his way. The boys, still shocked by what had happened, shouted after Will to at least say his name. Without even turning back, Will waved his hand at them again, then said that he was not worthy of this at all. After that, he ran off into the forest on his way. The amazed man and healer looked in the direction he had gone for some time. At this time, Will was running through the forest, holding in one hand a small bird that he had caught for his little sister. As he ran, he distinctly felt some movement in the bushes behind him. He quickly realized that someone was following him and tensed up. Will initially thought that this stranger would leave him okay, but that never happened. The boy stopped and turned around. He asked the unknown pursuer to show himself. Someone watching the boy from the bushes remained silent. After realizing he had been discovered, the unknown individual quickly moved out into more open ground to look at Will and also to show himself. The boy was very surprised when he saw a small clot of mucus in front of him which smiled kindly at him. For a while there was silence. The next moment Will asked in surprise if it was slime. He was surprised enough, but there was no fear on him. Will looked in amazement at the small blob of slime that was happily jumping right in front of him, showing no aggression. Will looked at the clot a little awkwardly and thought that the creature was looking at him as if it was saying that it wanted to go with the boy. Will looked at the rather happy slime and decided to ask if the creature wanted to go with him. Hearing this, the slime became happy and shook its head happily, showing that this was exactly what it wanted. Will turned slightly towards her and sighed, then said that it was okay. He opened his vest a little and told her to hide the slime in his clothes so that no one would see it. The creature did exactly as he asked. At a fairly rapid pace, the slime reached Will, and then in the blink of an eye, it was behind the boy's clothes. Will covered his vest with his hand for a moment and thought that it looked rather odd. He took a deep breath and then set off again. While quickly crossing any obstacles, he thought that there were several heroes in the city who were walking with monsters, so everything should be fine. However, considering that he was an 8-year-old child, it already seemed worse. After some time spent on the road, Will reached the stables, which were located on the territory of the Worm's family. He noted that he had already returned. The boy came in and petted the horses, then asked if they were well behaved. He was the only one living in the stable. Once he got used to it, it wasn't so bad, especially since he had nice neighbors in the horses. While he was petting the horses, he suddenly heard a dog barking nearby. The boy immediately looked with interest in the direction from which the sound came. He guessed who it could be. Little Saria rode towards her brother on Run, waving happily as the old woman who was looking after them walked behind them with a small smile on her face. Will was glad to see them. When the girl was close enough, Will picked her up and asked her what was wrong. He asked if she should be resting with their grandmother in the other room. He looked serious when he asked this. The old woman sighed and smiled, then apologized to Will and said that Saria just wanted to be with him today. Will looked at the girl and asked if it was true. Saria looked guilty. She was visibly upset by his words. She looked down at the floor and awkwardly asked if she couldn't be with her brother. There was a slight blush on her face and her eyes were shining. Will scratched his face in mild surprise. He looked at the girl and said that she could spend time with him, but there were some problems associated with that. The old woman handed Will a small basket containing sandwiches. The boy awkwardly apologized to his grandmother for disturbing her. She smiled and said it was okay because she thought Saria missed her brother very much. She said she would pick the girl up tomorrow. With a sad look, Saria walked forward despite everything. Will said that, in any case, next time he would hardly be in this place at this time. As the boys walked through the stable, Will asked the girl what had happened. The offended Saria did not want to answer him, so she just silently walked forward, not answering him. There was an awkward silence in the stable. The awkwardness was interrupted by Run, who barked loudly, trying to get closer to Will. The dog sniffed the boy's vest intently while Will asked in confusion what was wrong. The dog tried to get to his own. The next moment, the boy's vest began to rustle, and then, in the blink of an eye, slime came out of it. It jumped out so quickly that Will lost his balance a little and began to spin. The boy watched the dog playing with the slime and said, a little annoyed, that he should have hidden the slime. He asked the dog not to touch the creature, but the dog did not listen to him at all. Saria looked at the slime in shock, not knowing what to say. Noticing the girl and her gaze, the creature was very confused, not knowing what to do next. They could expect a worse reaction. Despite her expectations, Saria was delighted with this find. The extremely happy girl exclaimed that this creature reminded her of jelly. She picked up the slime and hugged it a little. The creature was nervous, but Saria just kept saying how cute the slime was. Looking at this, Will sighed calmly and smiled. Saria was stroking a small lump of slime. Will explained that the creature was slime and then noted that the girl should not tell anyone that she had seen it here. After a while, the boy took the bird he had caught himself, as well as the basket the old woman had given them. He offered the girl something to eat, to which she readily agreed. Will took a small stove and a frying pan on which he quickly cooked the dish. Saria smiled and thanked her brother for the treats. The boy also thanked his sister for her help. The boys changed into their sleep clothes. Will said that there was a blanket there, and if Saria got cold, she should tell him. The girl agreed. She hugged Run and said that he was very warm. The dog barked softly, confirming the girl's words. Suddenly, Will noticed that his sister was upset and asked if something had happened to her. He assumed that her father had frightened her. He asked if she was behaving well. The girl began to crumple the blanket in her hands. She hugged him a little and said with concern that her brother was taking her to study at the academy. At that moment, Will sighed quietly. He assumed that this was all the work of those servants who were so eager to help him with entering the academy. Will told his little sister that she shouldn't worry about it because when he entered the academy, Saria and Run would be with him too. The girl looked at him and asked if it was true. Will hugged them tightly and said he wondered if Saria would do well at the academy. The girl smiled and said it was obvious. After a while, the girl said that it was time to return to her grandmother. Will laughed and noted that Saria was a very good girl because she listened to her elders. 3 days later, work was in full swing in the mansion. Will was silently cleaning the toilet. Suddenly, he thought about how, ever since he regained his memory of his past life, he had been training even while cleaning toilets. The magic power in the body circulates at the same time as it deals a magic charge opposite to the body's movement. He thought he needed to combine the two. This exercise helped strengthen the muscles and the magic power. He did it with his bare hands on the captain's orders for extra training. To do this, he needs to cover his hands with a thin magical film so as not to touch the dirt. It's a great exercise. He had 100% protection from dirt. Suddenly, while doing the exercise, the boy heard loud sounds. He turned back and noted that it had become a bit too noisy. As it turned out, at this time Danon was saying that this act was too selfish. Ivan supported his brother and said that even though they were saving this worthless child, they were still members of the worm's family. The girl with long hair calmly told them to go to the head of the family with all their complaints. Danon and Ivan continued to follow the girl. They told her that they were watching the house while the head of the family was away. She completely ignored them. She asked the maid where Will Worms was. The maid said that she called him to the second floor. The girl immediately rushed to the toilet where Will was. She opened the door and saw a boy cleaning the toilet. She asked if he was Will Worms. The boy slowly rose from the floor and confirmed this, after which he asked what had happened. The girl bowed and said that she was part of the rescue team. She explained that the entrance exam to the Hero Academy would be tomorrow. Danon burst into the room and asked Will what was going on. He angrily asked why the boy had applied without even telling him anything about it. Will assumed that his application had been successfully delivered to the academy. The girl was patient. Will asked her if she had come to him just to tell him that there was an exam tomorrow. She looked at her brothers and said that she didn't usually do that, but she obviously expected something bad to happen, so she came. She took Will and said that they should go as soon as possible. Without thinking twice, the boy agreed and followed her right behind. Danon and Ivan looked at them, shocked. Danon shouted loudly, ordering Will not to ignore him. He immediately rushed to attack them, asking if Will was mocking them. He stated that he would not let this go so easily. He was about to hit the boy, but the girl deftly turned around. She touched his fist with just one finger, but it caused a violent reaction. Lightning discharges appeared in the air. Danon was genuinely amazed. Will was no less surprised as he watched what was happening before his eyes. He noted that this girl had really great magic. He was amazed that she stopped a fist with just one finger. The girl looked at him sternly and threatened that if he continued to behave like this, she might regard it as betrayal. Danon was seriously scared. The pain from the girl's actions and the fear from her threat combined to make tears appear in his eyes and fluid flow from his nose. He screamed in fear. After the girl left her brothers, Will calmly asked her if he could take his sister with him to the academy. The girl quickly confirmed this and said that his relatives and pets could stay in their dormitory during the exams. She also noted that mucus may also remain in the dormitory. At that moment, one of the maids immediately told Will that she would quickly go get Saria. Will agreed and thanked her politely. The other servants rejoiced because they were able to help the boy escape. Suddenly, Danon, who was still sitting on the floor in shock, told the girl that he was also going to take the exam. She looked down at him silently. The girl looked at him and smiled, then said that he should not be shy about doing what he wanted. There was something unusual in her smile. She gently lowered her hands, then gave him a small bow and told him that their Hero Academy would always be ready to accept applications from absolutely anyone. She smiled peacefully as she said this. They were riding in a small carriage which was pulled by a horse to which the small structure was tied. Saria loudly admired how strong the horse was. Noticing what the girl was doing, Will told her that she shouldn't lean so hard against the glass. The girl immediately froze when she heard these words. Suddenly, the girl who was riding with them turned to Will and fell silent. The boy turned towards her to find out why she called him. He immediately saw how Run was pressing himself against the girl, which embarrassed her quite a bit. Will told their pet to stop doing this because the girl was already blushing with embarrassment. The dog silently sniffed the girl, getting to know her. The girl looked down and said a little awkwardly that he shouldn't stop the dog because everything was fine. The dog sighed loudly, showing his displeasure. The girl covered the lower part of her face a little with her scarf, then looked away and awkwardly asked if she could pet Run a little. She was visibly nervous as she asked for permission to do so. Hearing this sweet request, Will smiled broadly and quickly agreed. The boy was very friendly and kind to the girl. She immediately hugged the dog and remarked on how big he was. Will kindly explained that Run was just a puppy who had wandered into their garden on his birthday. Will smiled and said that this wonderful dog was already years old at the moment and was still growing. Hearing this, the girl asked in amazement if he was really still growing. After that, the extremely interested girl's gaze fell on the little girl who was sitting and looking at her with admiration. She asked Saria Worms, a little awkwardly, what had happened. Perhaps there was something she wanted to ask the stranger from her brother's academy. The girl called the girl's sister and asked her what her name was. Immediately after that, she introduced herself, saying her name's Saria. The girl coughed quietly, then apologized and said that she forgot to introduce herself. She closed her eyes, then smiled sweetly, and a blush appeared on her face. She said that her name was Artie. The full name of the mysterious girl was Artie Zenon Barling. After she introduced herself, she placed her hand on Saria's head and stroked the cute girl. Saria was simply in incredible delight. Her eyes were shining as she looked at Artie. She loudly screamed that her sister had very beautiful hair. She also noted that her eyes were also simply wonderful. The sudden compliments definitely caught the girl off guard. She blushed deeply, not knowing at all what to answer to this. Saria placed her hands on the girl's knees and smiled sweetly at her, while Artie, red as a tomato, thanked her and stroked her head. At the same time, the girl combed Run-Run's fur, who was no less pleased than Saria. Will watched the proceedings with a satisfied expression. Afterwards, he asked the girl how she knew that the captains were going to interfere with his exam. This question brought Artie to his senses. She explained that the person who had brought them the statement had previously asked them to take care of it. Will immediately realized that it was the maid and butler who had been so caring about him who had asked. He thought hard because now he would be worried about them and their well-being. As if reading the boy's thoughts, Artie told him that he should not worry. She proudly explained that the academy would not say who had brought the report, and they would ask them not to punish their subordinates for it. Will smiled awkwardly and said that was a little reassuring. Saria, who was still watching the changing scenery outside the window, called Will to look at the large building nearby. Noticing the building, Artie noted that they seemed to have arrived. As soon as the coachman opened the carriage door, Saria and Run-Run immediately ran out to look at the district. The girl was shouting in admiration about how big the building was, one might even say, huge. Will reached out his hand to the girl, trying to tell her not to run like that because she could fall. Saria did not listen to her brother at all and looked around. Artie told the guys that she would walk them to the room. After a while, the girl brought the guys to the dorm. Will, along with Saria and Run-Run, stayed in the 401st room of the dorm. Artie politely opened the door for them and pointed with her hand, indicating that this was their room. She explained that if he could pass the exam, they could stay in this place for the rest of their lives. Artie handed Will his keys right into his hands. Then she said that later she could show them the nursery. She explained that he could take Saria there. Will took the keys silently. After that, he asked in surprise if there was even such a thing here. Artie said that it was obviously so because they had quite a large number of students with children. At this time, Saria was already happily jumping on the bed. The girl explained that in that place, children also receive the education that is necessary for their age. Some of them are even younger than Saria, and some are older than Will Worms himself. The boy noted that it was quite strange, which Artie simply couldn't help but agree with. She said that the Hero Academy is a place where the most talented beings from all over the world are trained. She said that they arranged the most comfortable conditions for students to live and study. They had everything: a canteen, a training center, and a dormitory. Will thought he could now understand the reason they had built the academy outside the capital. It was quite different from the way they had been treated at House Worms. The boy led Saria by the hand along with Artie and thought that he really had to pass the exam at any cost, and all for the sake of his beloved Saria. After some time spent on the road from the hostel, the guys came to a small nursery. The sweet teacher took Saria and Run-Run away. The girl turned and waved at Will, also wishing him luck. The boy noted that he did not expect at all that they took care of the services as well. Artie calmly explained that this was also part of their job. She also said that she had already been informed that Will Worms knew almost nothing about the academy itself or about the entrance exams. The boy froze and sighed a little quietly. In his past life, there wasn't even an academy for heroes, and his family was forced to work day and night, so they didn't have much contact with the outside world. As they walked down the hallway, Artie asked if Will had checked the guardian deity's favor level. Will looked at Artie with a little surprise and asked what it was. The girl patiently explained that this was a technique developed by a great sage who was a member of the Council of Sages. Will continued to ask. He wanted to know what the great sage was like. Artie said that this was the disciple of the sage Edelphus Worms. She was talking about Milt Edelweiss. Hearing this, Will was a little surprised and proud that Milt had already received the last name and also developed a new technique without his help. He blushed a little and thought that it was a great honor. He again asked why exactly big. He asked why, for example, it could not be a great sage. The girl stopped and said that he was right. After that, she said that the sage was Edelphus Worms. Will froze for a moment in shock at the information he received. He asked what kind of guardian deities these were. The girl said that every representative of the human race has a guardian deity. The guardian deity is a human deity who leads an entire race. Sometimes not only people, but also other creatures receive the protection of deities. She said that the most famous of them was a member of the purchasing council. He was Dion, who was the favorite of the god of water. Will wondered if Dion had the same last name as Milt. He assumed it was from his past life. He looked away and thought how embarrassing that was. Artie said that those who are favored by the deities are endowed with powers corresponding to their patrons, and those who enjoy the greatest favor are the favorites of the gods. Therefore, a person whose deity is simply a human god is simple. This short conversation allowed the boys to waste time, so they reached their destination quite quickly. They entered a room that was completely covered in magical protection. In the center of the room was a small book, and next to it was a pole with a ball in it. She explained that this was a device that would help him measure his favor. The girl led him in and told him to place his hand on a large crystal nearby. After that, she said that now it was possible to measure his favor. The boy put his hand on it and began to look closely at the magic ball. He thought about being an apostle who had studied with many different gods. He was sure that many of them would be his guardians. Suddenly, the image of the goddess he had just spoken to appeared before his eyes. The girl said that the measurement was finished, and Will silently shuddered. Somewhat shocked, he remained silent, prompting Artie to ask if something was wrong. The boy said everything was fine, then asked what the results were. The girl looked at the magic book and said that Will Worm's patron was apparently a simple human deity. Will was surprised to hear this. Will sighed a little disappointedly. Then he looked back at the book that Artie was still holding and asked if it turned out that God was his only guardian. In response, the girl said that unfortunately everything was true. Hearing this, Will fell silent for a while. All this time he only looked ahead without saying a word. The boy continued. He asked if there were any cases of loss of consciousness when using this measuring device. He looked awkward while asking about it. The girl became embarrassed, after which she said that, according to the information that was already known to her, there had been no such cases before. Will stared ahead in silence. He thought about how he had practiced with the gods for quite some time before being reborn in this place. He was sure that they liked him. He looked ahead in frustration, thinking that all these gods had always been so friendly with him, and now there was no one there. Suddenly, he saw a glow. 10 seconds later, Artie noticed something unusual, causing her to tell Will to place his hand on the crystal again. The boy looked at him intently, then slowly placed his hand on the crystal, on which small inscriptions glittered. He closed his eyes, plunging into his consciousness and also completely surrendering himself to this crystal and the opportunity to find its patron. After a few moments, the boy opened his eyes again, but the location around him had changed. He saw a large room in which he had once spoken with a previously unknown goddess. He looked around in surprise, examining this room. Will looked up and asked out loud if this was really the world of the gods. Some bewilderment was written on his face. Suddenly, the boy heard someone behind him asking what Will saw there. The boy was a little surprised to hear a familiar voice. Behind him stood a very agitated but already familiar goddess. She looked at him and then asked if the one she saw in front of her right now was Edel. The boy closed his eyes and put his hands to the sides, then said that his name was Will now. The goddess recognized him and came closer, then told him that he looked very good now. Immediately after this, crowds of other gods began to appear behind the goddess. The girl was obviously unhappy about this. They shouted joyfully, asking if their Edelphus had arrived. When they noticed the boy, they were even happier. They asked if this meant that the boy had already died. Will calmly told them that this was not entirely true because he had died and now he bore the name Will. The gods answered him loudly, enjoying the dialogue. The goddess stepped aside, but her face was displeased. She began to push them away with all her might. She came closer to him and asked what had happened to make him there. Will asked, a little surprised if they hadn't been watching his actions. The gods began shouting at him about what they had seen all too well. One by one they joined in, noting that they had all been watching Will live. The boy smiled sweetly as he listened to them. The further the gods went, the more irritated the girl who had been with Will from the very beginning of his journey became. She quickly looked at the other gods with displeasure and said that this was making her a little angry. The goddess quickly waved her hand and she successfully cast a spell on all the gods in the room. It was a spell that forbade them from speaking. Immediately after that, the room was silent. The girl closed her eyes, ignoring the god's displeasure, and then asked how Will had managed to get to this place. The boy thought for a moment and looked at the floor, trying to remember what had happened earlier. After telling the goddess a short story, the girl asked in surprise how he could do it. Will did not know the answer to this question. He noted that for the gods, people are like the smallest ants. Even if he starts feeding them on his own whim, it doesn't mean that they are interested in the person. He was leading to the fact that sometimes God is not interested in human life, even if his most beloved child is there and lives there. Noticing that Will was quite ostentatiously distracted, she exclaimed loudly, asking if he was really thinking about something else again. Will looked away and began to hum something of his own. The girl began to swing her legs. She asked Will if he really liked living alone. She said that sometimes she even wondered how different this dimension was from the world Will lived in. She sighed and smiled, then said that everything was as Will said, because these two worlds were completely different in their structure. After that, she decided to change the subject and said that they should go back to her first question. With a big smile, she asked how the boy was doing. Will said that everything was going smoothly and as usual. The boy wondered what could have happened to him if he had died before his memory returned. The girl hesitated when she heard this question and then laughed awkwardly. Suddenly, someone else interrupted their conversation and said that such a thing would simply never happen. Will was a little surprised to see the new interlocutor. Inugami appeared before him, the unknown one who had the form of a beastman. He told the boy that no one would have known about it because Will was always looked after by Luxanis. Hearing this, Will asked in shock if he had heard Laogani's name correctly. He stared at Inugami. The man smiled widely, so much so that his eyes closed. He told Will that Run Run was the divine child of Luxanis. Hearing this, Will asked in amazement if Run Run was not an ordinary dog. He said that he, a deity named Luxanis, had sent his child to Earth when Will was born. The goddess jumped forward and pointed to herself, saying that he had done so at her request. Will noted with some surprise what he had heard. Inugami said that Run Run has no memories of this world because he was sent to Earth when he was a puppy, but he has the same magical power called divine as he does. Run Run's purpose has always been to help and protect Will. The boy said that Run Run is more like his friend than a guard. He is very smart, kind, and also takes great care of his sister. Inugami smiled proudly and closed his eyes. He said that it was indeed so. He patted the boy on the head and said that just as Run Run got along with Will, he was also very happy to meet this boy. Immediately after this, Inugami asked Will if he remembered that he had called Luxanis Run Run Om. Upon hearing this, the boy asked in amazement if that was really true. Inugami said that when they first met the boy, he immediately gave him this name. Hearing this, Will was quite surprised. Suddenly, another goddess appeared behind him who said that she, too, was sending her child to him on Earth. Will immediately turned to the source of the voice. The goddess of slime appeared before him. She said that he really looked incredibly cute. Hearing her, he asked in surprise if she was slime. She said that was exactly it. The goddess said that Will's little sister had given her a great name, which could not be said about his ability to choose names. The boy blushed, then thanked the goddess for the compliment. Together with Inugami, she thought that Will was incredibly stupid. Suddenly, the boy came to his senses. He asked if it was the case that the children of these gods who lived on Earth also had divine powers. Inugami said that it was not quite so. There were children and demigods. Each deity, like Inugami, has children who are mere mortals, and in Luxanis' case, they are ordinary dogs. But there are also demigods who are under the patronage of your guardians and possess magic. The children of the guardian gods included Ardi, and the demigods were Run Run, and the slime that followed Will, Fury. The goddess lost her patience and asked if they had finished speaking since she also had questions. Inugami exclaimed, saying that he had not finished yet and that she should wait a little longer. The goddess said with tears in her eyes that she had to find out about Will's life. Suddenly she noticed that he had become transparent. The boy assumed that his time had probably already run out. Finally, the gods decided to say goodbye. Inugami told Will to remember that Luxani's was watching over him. Slime said that Fury would always be there, as the child and she were inextricably linked. Will thanked them for their concern. The goddess sternly said that she had little time, so he should listen to her. She called him worriedly and said that this was important because the boy's human life was at stake. She tried to say that it was also about a deity who was watching over him, but at the most inopportune moment their time ended and the connection was broken. Will stared into space trying to figure out what this goddess was talking about because he didn't understand anything. She was very hard to hear, so he didn't hear anything important. He stared into space while Artie watched him. She called him over and then told him that the number of guardian deities did not count towards the entrance exam. Initially, the examinees are given preliminary testing competitions. In order to learn their specialty and take measures to pass the exam, it is necessary to check the check in the temple. Will looked at her in amazement. Artie looked at him and asked if he understood her. Will looked at her silently. He sighed and thanked her, then said that he would do everything in his power to pass the exam. The girl said that was good. Will asked what the entrance exams would be like. He wondered if he could find out in advance. The girl said that the exam would be divided into written and practical. She said that there are several types of practical exams. If he gets high marks, he can be sure that he has passed. People who have received blessings from the deities are considered lucky and fortunate. Will asked if Artie had a guardian deity. The girl said that her guardian god was the god of the sword. Will immediately remembered this deity. He noticed that she was very young but was already a member of the rescue squad. The girl was very white and said that although she was a member, her position was actually an assistant, and she had just recently passed the test to be a member of the squad. Will asked if it was possible. Artie confirmed it, saying that hard training and desire can do anything. At this time, many gods were watching them. The gods wondered if Will didn't trust them. The other gods agreed and told him to explain himself to them. Meanwhile, the goddess silently covered her ears, not wanting to listen. She asked what she could do. She didn't think he would come back so quickly that she wouldn't have time to tell him anything. She told them to stop talking nonsense. One of the gods told her to calm down. The god of flame told Genie that there was, however, a problem with the device that the child of the god of lies had created, and that was why Will was wary of them. Genie asked why they thought that, since it wasn't that bad. The human race does not know about the existence of the apostles, and therefore they are powerless there. He wondered why their power could not be measured by this device. He also asked who the apostles were. The god of flame asked his interlocutor if he really was a god. He said that only recently the slime goddess had explained everything clearly and made it clear that there was a difference between children and deities. Suddenly he asked if the fire god was talking about children and demigods. He wondered what the connection was. The flame god asked if the genie had forgotten. He said that Will, who was reborn after making a deal with God, is an unusual child. It turned out that he had the mark of the divine eclipse, and he was the same as Run and Fury. In addition, he is the child of the supreme god and the guardian princess, and the apostle is the demigod, possessing magical abilities. Will, having received their blessing, was now the messenger of God. In general, the apostles are beast demigods, and Will is one of the apostles since he has the same magic as the guardian demigods. He asked why Will was treated like an incompetent child. They spoke of a device meant for mortals, and that it simply could not measure the power of a god. The god of lies thought for a moment, then said that he understood everything. The god of flame understood that his interlocutor was lying. He said he thought Will wouldn't have any problems. He said Will was his student after all. The flame god noted that the flame god was right. The others also joined in, saying that Will was their student too. The goddess cried out for Will to be sent his one beast demigod. The second deity said he had already started working on it. The gods thought the guardians were nothing but trouble. At this time, Saria was playing with a doll in kindergarten. Suddenly, Will came into the room, and the girl immediately became happy. She went towards him, but a boy who was running past hit the girl with all his might. She hit the nightstand, causing the jug that was standing on it to start wobbling. He was close to falling on the girl, who was crying in pain. Artie wanted to warn the girl, but in the blink of an eye, Will rushed past her, creating a strong stream of wind. In just one moment, Will successfully took his little sister and saved her from danger. The vase fell and broke, but Saria was no longer there. Artie looked ahead in shock, not seeing anyone. At that moment, Will reached incredible speed, thanks to which he was able to save the girl. He found himself on the other side of the room, where he pulled Saria to her feet. Artie was amazed that he had covered such a distance, and in an instant he had caught the girl. She hadn't even seen him move from his spot. At this time, Will hugged his sister, breathing heavily, while Saria looked at her brother as if he were a hero. The teacher scolded the boy who hit Saria. He was crying at the time. Saria apologized for disturbing her, but Artie said that everything was fine and she should not worry about anything. Artie stood silently in front of the large door. She held her weapon, bracing herself for the tension. Suddenly, the door swung open right in front of her. The man who was inside invited the girl to come inside. She walked in and told the girl inside that she had just returned from a mission. The girl agreed and then asked how it had gone. It was Zenobia Edelbaring, a member of the Swordsmen's Council and also a student of Edelphus. She asked if Will had had time to prove himself. Artie said that his behavior was not at all like that of an 8-year-old child. She noted that he was quite wise for his age and his strength was extremely great. Zenobia rose from her chair and noted what she had heard. She started walking around her desk, lost in her thoughts. She kept thinking that this was interesting enough for her. Suddenly, Artie said that Will Worm's divine guardian was a human god. Hearing this, Zenobia stopped in her tracks, amazed. She froze. Zenobia stood there for a moment, then looked at Artie and asked if it was true. The girl immediately confirmed her words. Zenobia was deep in thought again. She didn't understand why this was so, and she was very curious about it. Artie asked what the girl was talking about. Zenobia closed one eye and said that everything was fine and there was nothing wrong with it. She asked again if there was anything else. After these words, Artie thought about it. She did not understand at all what this phrase could mean. She tilted her head and wondered what Zenobia could possibly be thinking, since she hadn't intended to say anything. Seeing this reaction, the elf became nervous. Zenobia placed her hands on Artie's shoulders and took a deep breath, then asked the girl to listen to her. She said seriously that she didn't want to interrogate her at all, but it was important for her to know if Artie had noticed any changes in this boy. She talked about his behavior, and also about whether it was possible that he was behaving unnaturally. Artie looked away and remembered that Will had asked her earlier if there had been any previous cases of fainting while using the measuring device. Hearing this, Zenobia was a little surprised. She began to pace around her desk again, wondering what he could possibly mean. Zenobia thought she needed to consult Milt immediately. Artie watched in silence. Artie said that if his guardian deity was just a god, then he probably didn't have any powers or magic. Zenobia took a deep breath, then asked what Artie thought about it. The girl remembered how the boy saved his sister, after which she confidently said that Will had an innate talent. Seeing this reaction, Zenobia smiled. She took out one of her wooden swords and said that if that was the case, then Artie should continue to watch Will. Artie said that she understood. Zenobia began swinging her sword, practicing vigorously. Artie watched this silently for a while. Zenobia's blows became more and more powerful, causing air currents from the blows to hit Artie's face. The girl remained calm until the very end and stood still. Without stopping to swing her sword, Zenobia asked if there was anything else she wanted to ask Artie. She immediately asked why Zenobia had told her to bring Will Worms. Zenobia was a little surprised, then asked if Artie understood why they were doing all this. She said that they must not allow unrest. Then she asked if Artie understood that. She caught the girl's stern gaze. Artie sighed quietly, then said that it didn't sound very convincing. Right after that, she said she was sorry. Zenobia pointed out that it was okay because Artie had every right to think that way. Suddenly, Artie mentioned Will Worm's name and then the monster of disaster. She asked Zenobia if it had anything to do with Tinebris. Zenobia froze. Zenobia quickly turned and looked at Artie. The girl noticed that Zenobia had told her to keep an eye on Will last time. She asked if it had anything to do with the disaster monster. She continued, saying that she thought sabotage was what Tinebris was really afraid of. Zenobia stopped the girl with a stern expression, then asked her why she thought that. Artie suddenly fell silent. She said that they, the Salvation Army, are an organization that was created to fight cults. She thought it reasonable that these thoughts were visiting her since Zenobia had previously told her to look after this boy. She said that if he really had any connection to the gods, the cult would consider him a threat and try to destroy him. She noted that it was understandable why this bothered her so much. Artie asked who he was. Zenobia stopped the girl, then looked her intently in the eyes. At that moment, she looked worried. Suddenly, she smiled broadly and put her hand on Artie's head. She said that the girl was very smart because she immediately grasped the essence of their mission. She said that there were some reasons why she couldn't tell her anything yet, but she would find out soon. She turned away and waved her hand. Artie awkwardly agreed with her. After that, Artie excused herself and left the office, leaving Zenobia alone with her thoughts. Tinebris, that's what you can call a monster of disaster. A cult is a secret society that fanatically supports the beast of disaster, or as it is also called in certain circles, the god of disaster. They are so sure that they can resurrect the beast and become the strongest race on Earth. It is also possible that this could happen soon. She opened her desk drawer, thinking that they needed to hurry and gather a force of talented warriors, people who could stand up to the beast's forces. She took out a small scroll from the desk that can measure a person's magical power. It is attached with the application for admission. She opened it and thought about how she had previously created it to quickly find the people they needed, but almost no one could meet the requirements they needed. However, Will Worms was one big exception. She was genuinely curious about who this mysterious boy was. At this time, Will sat with his elbows on the table. He was barely able to stay awake. He thought about the fact that the number of guardian deities was not included in the results of the entrance exams. He remembered that Artie had told him earlier that if the guardian deity became one with a person, he would lose concentration. At that time, little Saria was sleeping on Run-Run's back. She yawned loudly. Will thought that if he failed the exam, he could safely return to his hometown and continue living a peaceful life. He should have enough money for his upkeep and food to raise Saria. Suddenly, the extremely sleepy girl noticed how deeply her brother was lost in thought. She looked at him worriedly and asked if something had happened. She asked if it was possible that he was hungry. Will was so lost in thought that her question caught him off guard. He asked the girl what she was talking about. He smiled and said that it was true and he was a little hungry now. Hearing this, the girl hurried a little, saying that in that case she would give him something. The next moment, the girl took a small piece of dried meat out of her dress and happily offered it to her brother to eat. Will was quite surprised when he saw this meat. He realized that this was the same dried meat that he had previously received from the vassals. At the time when they still lived in the city, they had no opportunity to eat, nor even the most decent food. That was why sometimes the vassals would share food with them. He realized that Saria had saved a small piece of dried meat because she already knew what hunger was. She was afraid that hunger could overtake them again. Will took the meat from his sister's hands, then looked at her and asked if she was hungry. The girl immediately shook her head, showing that she was not hungry at all. She smiled sweetly and said that she had already had a small snack before. Right at the very moment when she said this, her stomach made loud sounds. Will turned pale. Saria said that it was precisely because she had already eaten that he should take the meat for himself. Will awkwardly thanked his sister for the treats. He took a piece of meat in his hands and smiled. Saria also smiled widely and told him to eat well. Will accepted the gift from his sister and happily took a small bite of the meat. He said it was really delicious and Saria smiled widely. Will leans a little closer to his sister. He wants to tell her something. The boy tells Saria that there seems to be quite a lot of food in the kitchen and smiles. The girl's eyes widen in surprise and she was, to say the least, shocked by this news. The boy reminds his sister that she can take this food whenever she wants. Then the girl's surprise knew no bounds. She certainly did not expect to hear these words from her brother. Will places his hand on his sister's shoulder. He reminds Saria that she should no longer keep food in her pocket. Will remembers the past and understands how difficult it was for the girl. Saria smiles sweetly and basks in the caress of her brother's hand on her cheek. The girl says that she is fine because her brother is always there for her and touches the boy's hand with her small palms in response. The boy realizes that he shouldn't worry too much about Saria anymore because they won't have to experience terrible hunger anymore. He reminds her that the girl can go and eat a little in the kitchen, which surprises her again. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Saria still can't believe her eyes. She stares at the dish in front of her, mesmerized. She has a spoon and fork in her hands, and on the plate there is meat, vegetables, and other food. The girl, confused, asks her brother if she can really eat it all. Will smiles broadly at his sister and says that of course she can eat as much as she wants without limiting herself. The brother sits opposite the girl and assures her that if Saria eats a lot, she will become as strong and fast as he is. While the boys were sitting at the table, a satisfied Run came up to them, carrying a small piece of food in his mouth. The girl devours the food with both cheeks. She really likes the taste of the dishes prepared in the kitchen. Meanwhile, her brother carefully wipes her mouth with a napkin and asks her to eat it a little slower. Suddenly, the guy's attention is drawn to the surrounding environment. As it turned out, there were practically no people in the kitchen. All the tables were empty, and there was only one person standing in line. The boy assumes that all the students who were supposed to be in the kitchen are currently on field training. Will is still thinking and doesn't understand what's happening because he also signed up for field training. The boy turns to his sister and asks her permission to ask a question. Meanwhile, Saria licks the spoon, getting dirty with food again, and listens attentively to her brother. The girl is curious and Will asks what happened after he entered school. Saria guesses that her brother is worried about something and asks about this condition with concern. Will assures his sister that he is fine. However, the boy notices that sometimes he hears some sounds that make him feel uneasy. He asks if Saria can talk about this situation. She lowers her head and her face immediately shows deep sadness. Saria steeled herself, showing it with her fists clenched and her expression confident, and said that she was fine and that nothing would happen to her if she told her brother. Will patted Saria on the head and praised her, saying that she was a great girl, deciding to tell him. The girl was pleased with the praise and confirmed Will's words that she was a good girl. Saria hugged the slime tightly with happiness. The brother strokes the pet's head and says with a smile that he must give it a name. He calls the creature Fury. The girl is unexpectedly surprised that her brother named her pet. Fury gurgled happily, clearly enjoying his owner's stroking of his head. Will guesses that the pet is probably very happy to be around them. Even though Saria had called the slime Fury before, the boy had long since gotten used to the name. However, he wanted to say that it was now official and the slime now had its own name. Will thinks that he shouldn't mix up the pet's name anymore because he forgets it every time. Although, on the one hand, there's nothing wrong with that. While his brother was thinking, Saria tried to distract him from his thoughts. Saria is incredibly indignant and objects to his brother's new idea because the pet has already been named that way. The girl hugs her pet for support. The boy smiles and says that he supposedly remembered this moment. After all, the girl herself named him that. Will admits that he has already forgotten how his sister named the pet. The girl smiles happily and holds her Fury in her arms. Meanwhile, Fury sits on the table and smiles. It seems that the pet also likes his name. The boy wonders if this could be another feature of his because he understands everything that Fury wants to say. The boy made a firm decision. Will happily says that from now on the pet's name is Fury. The brother and sister happily look at the pet, who smiles proudly, sitting in the same place. Meanwhile, Run lay down to rest. Sometime later in the school dormitory, the boy changed into a colorful cape which was worn over his shirt and trousers. He expressed his readiness to set out on a journey. Saria, with true sincerity, wishes her brother luck and encourages him. And Run stands behind the girl and happily wags his tail. At this wonderful moment, there is a knock on the door. A female voice is heard from behind the door. Artie asks if she can come in. Will invites the guest into the house. The girl with a sword in her belt asks if the boy is ready to go. Will happily thanks the girl for accompanying him and asks if she has any business of her own. The girl is firmly convinced that she is free. The guy objects and reminds that today is a preparation day. Artie still insists and assures Will that she has plenty of free time despite the hectic preparation day. The dog happily approaches the guest and begins licking her cheeks. At this point, Will wonders if Artie can give instructions as a regular assistant or if she is allowed to accompany the boy. The girl smiles tenderly, responds affectionately to the dog's attentions, and scratches his cheek and chin. Artie wonders if she and Will take Rune and the slime with them. The boy replies that the slime is now called Fury, and that is his official name. The slime happily rubs itself against Artie's cheek and she strokes the pet sitting on her shoulder with her index finger. Will says with confidence that if it were possible, he would ask Artie to take these animals with him. He has received permission and Fury is now determined to go too. However, the boy is distracted from his thoughts and heroic ideas and turns to look at his sister. He has never left Saria alone before. Will wonders if something could happen if he takes the pets with him. Saria doesn't quite understand her brother's worries and asks anxiously what happened. Will leans down a little lower and asks his sister's permission to take Run Run and Fury with her today. Will wonders if the girl can handle it on her own. She says with sparkling eyes that she will be fine. The boy thanked his sister, patting her head, and said that when he finished, they would definitely go to the kitchen for dinner together. Artie approaches the pets and takes little Saria by the hand. She decides to take the girl to the nursery first and then head to the entrance exam site. After Saria was taken to the nursery, Artie and Will went out to the exam area. It was a large space, more like a park or a square. The boy thanked Artie for accompanying him. The girl wished good luck to the boy and the pets and left. As Will waved after her, a rude tone was heard from behind. Behind the boy stood two rather extraordinary guys in respectable suits. One of them objects and asks to pay attention to those who have come. The second guy picks up the idea and notes that these rogues are sticking their noses up as if they were kings and are walking around here. Will doesn't pay the slightest attention or even turn around to the caustic barbs. The boys turn Will around to face them. They practically shout and ask how dare he ignore them. Run responds to this gesture towards his master with an angry growl. The guys start shouting that Will dared to disobey one of the legitimate heirs of the Worm's family, and therefore disobeyed the Worm's family. The armored guard asked to stop the fight, to which his colleague reminded him that these two guys were from a rich family and no one dared to contradict them, and asked the guard to calm down. The people around gradually begin to pay attention to the boys and gather around them. One of the passers-by readily notes that the Worm's family has 4 guardian deities. Will closes his eyes in irritation and does not understand at all what the people around him are talking about. After all, the boy has no idea who they are and what kind of deities they have, since everyone raised such a fuss. One of the guys hopes that Will doesn't run away, otherwise it would be very sad for him to end up like this. Bully said that he would be quite upset if Will chickened out and just left. The guy doesn't quite understand why Will isn't paying attention to him and asks him angrily what he's digging around in there. Will replies that he's trying to calm his dog down because he could tear the two guys to pieces. The guy gets mad beyond belief and asks if the boy is even listening to their words. Run expresses his emotions more and more angrily and is ready to pounce on his offenders. Will turns around and repeats the words. His eyes are shining and he asks in bewilderment if those two really think he can chicken out. The boys clearly did not expect such a turn of events and were extremely surprised by the boy's reaction. Will had already turned completely towards the boys. He turns to them and with an angry expression asks how one of them dared to even think that Will could chicken out like that and call the boy a name. Will almost shouted and said that these two were just scum. He advised them to shut their mouths and not to disgrace their well-known family name. The boys were undoubtedly shocked by such a performance towards them. The tall guy from the Worm's family clarifies what the boy said and was about to deal with him when his brother blocks his way and asks him to wait because he intends to talk to him himself. The second brother turns his nose up at Will and asks if he has a guardian deity too. The boy doesn't quite understand what the second brother is getting at. And he asks if Will's deity can compete with the deities of the Worm's family, since there are 4 of them. Someone from the surrounding people asked about the 4 guardians of the Worm's family because it was hard to believe. They answered that it was true because they were famous people. The second brother bared his teeth and ordered Wilk to answer as he was already tired of waiting. The boy agreed. The Worm's brothers did not expect Will to accept their offer and smiled widely. The tall brother said that he did not hear the boy's answer. One of them thought that he should ask again. Will exhales heavily. He says that, as it seems to him, the guy has problems not only with his head but also with his hearing if he did not hear the answer. The people around were still watching this scene and were surprised by such a sharp answer from the boy. The thief brothers bared their teeth again and looked at Will with anger. One of the brothers said that he would not live. The boys began insulting Will towards his family and said that he didn't belong there. Will was finally annoyed by this, but he still waited patiently. One of the brothers noticed this and suggested the idea that the boy could not even move his hand since he stood in place without the slightest movement. Will begins to spin the glove in his hand at great speed. A second later, the garment crashes into the offender's face with great force. Will wonders if this is all that one of the brothers of such a great family of worms is capable of. The boy is firmly convinced that he will never forgive his family's vile and base insults and threats against him. One of the brothers realizes that Will has challenged him to a duel. The boy turns to the boy and asks him with a sarcastic grin why he is shaking. Is such a big guy really afraid of some 8-year-old with one god? The guy was about to object when he immediately received a second glove to the face. Will was sure that this was what was expected. He explains that he challenged the Worm's brothers to a duel because all they can do is talk. Responding to the boy's latest barbs, the guys looked at him in bewilderment and asked if he really was completely nuts. The tall brother smirked but still accepted the boy's bold offer. He leans towards the boy and lays out his conditions. If Will loses, he must kneel before the Worm's brothers. The boy agrees and asks when the long-awaited duel will begin. The second brother literally starts shouting and asks how the boy can be so calm when his brother's worms can just eat him alive. Will barely audibly says that in this duel, most likely, everything will be the other way around. Will reminds that now it is time to listen to his conditions. If the boy wins, the two brothers will visit his mother's grave and ask her forgiveness for everything they said earlier. The boys responded with loud and disgusting laughter and said that the boy would not win even if the sky and the earth changed places. Suddenly, one of the passers-by said that it was time for the brothers to stop chatting, otherwise the duelists might be late for the written exam, and called for the duel that had suddenly begun. A guy stood quietly to the side. He was the examiner. He said that duels between students are prohibited without permission from above. Will explained that he wasn't even a student yet. However, the newcomer replied that even candidates were treated as students, so the boy counted as well. The Worm's brothers are perplexed as to why this boy is not afraid of anything at all, since their words and threats do not affect him. The guy who spoke about the ban on dueling objected that, in that case, he would undoubtedly be the brothers' duelist. The brothers objected in bewilderment and reminded the examiner about today's written exam. However, the guy who came expressed his most sincere desire to also take part in the duel. The guy said that it was already late and the written exam could wait a little. The boy was still sure that he would not calm down, would not be able to concentrate on the written test until he restored the honor of his late mother. Will understands that he has a great opportunity, because if he enters the academy, then no family will ever be able to threaten him. At this time, the examiner assures the guys that the brothers and the boy may be late. After the duel, he promises to show them the place where the test will be held. The duel is sanctioned by the academy. Will promises that he will pay back all his debts once he deals with the guys. He promises to do this for the sake of his father, mother, and Saria. Will have to put these nasty braggarts in their place if he is to pass the entrance exam. The examiner points to the dueling area and adds that the opponents can compete here to their heart's content. He repeats the conditions. If Will wins, the two Worms brothers will apologize to his mother. If the Worms win, the boy will leave the academy himself, but before that he will be forced to admit his absolute defeat. The boy calmly stated that he understood absolutely all the conditions, and the brothers expressed their impatience and desire to quickly begin the duel and test their strength in a duel, showing who was really the best candidate for students at the academy. The guy asks the boy with interest if he thinks this outcome is fair, since the brothers won't lose anything, even if they lose. Will says that he's not against it at all, so he's okay with it. The examiner asks the boy for the last time if he can handle his brothers, since there are two of them. The boy calmly answers that he is not alone either. At that moment, Run sits on the stand and happily looks at his master with Fury sitting on his head. The organizer asks the boy if he should fight one-on-one, since that would be according to the rules. The tall brother shrugs and says that they will quickly deal with this boy since they always laugh at the weak. He runs his tongue across his lips and thinks that he will deal with the boy without even having time to blink an eye. The organizer of the duel says that if all parties agree, then the duel can begin. The examiner leaves the podium. He sincerely hopes that the duel will not take much time and that the guys will quickly sort things out among themselves. The brothers begin to assume a fighting stance while the boy stands calmly and whistles. One of the boys is puzzled and asks the boy with interest what he is doing. Will notices that the tall brother is quite noisy. Will said before the fight that the brothers would have to attack him first. In response to this, the brothers immediately rushed at the boy like a predator. They called upon their magical powers and magic circles appeared before their hands. They called upon the boy to prepare to know all their strength and supposedly limitless power. Will admits that these two are indeed strong. The boy dodges to the side and a moment later a huge shock wave passes by him. The surrounding people are amazed at the performance because in the place of the shock wave there appeared a huge cloud of dust and pieces of tiles. One of the brothers praises the other for hitting the boy with such force. The tall brother laughed and reminded him that no one had ever managed to defeat him. Will, meanwhile, was already standing behind his brother and noticed that the boy was too confident in himself since he thought that he could immediately neutralize him, much less defeat him. The brother was just about to turn around and at that moment the boy had already blocked his movements, grabbing and twisting one arm back. Will grabs brother Worms by the neck and presses his cheek firmly to the ground. With a completely ordinary technique without using magic, Will had already dealt with one of the arrogant brothers. He, lying on the ground, said that he was in incredible pain and plaintively asked to let him go. The second brother of the group turned to Will and asked what he was doing. The guy started using magic power. Will notes that if the guy uses magic, he will inadvertently touch his brother. The second brother objected that the boy was simply afraid. Will did not understand and asked why the boy decided so. At this time, the tall brother was lying on the ground and did not understand how the boy was able to grab him, that he could not even move. The boy asks, squeezing the neck of the defeated one, has he really lost confidence in himself? The boy, holding his grip, says that he can defeat him in no time, but he likes to torture his opponent. The tall brother asks him to stop squeezing his neck. The second brother, who was miraculously lucky enough not to be hit and remain free, started shouting and asked the boy to stop treating them so rudely, because they were simply just making fun of him. Will closed his eyes, sighing hopelessly. He realized that there was no point in this fight. At this time, his brother was lying on the floor, trying to catch his breath, and beads of sweat were running down his face. Suddenly, the brother who was held in a strong grip screamed and began waving his arms, and bitter tears flowed from his eyes. Will said that he would give him some time to come to his senses and later attack each other fairly. The boy doesn't think they'll finish the duel quickly. He hopes he can attack them because he can't lose, because he won't be able to get to the entrance exam at all if they hurt him even a little. Will decides that he needs to quickly eliminate these two brothers and end this whole annoying circus. While Will was thinking, the two guys again gathered their resolve and accepted the boy's offer. The Worms brothers began to call upon magic again and cast various spells. The atmosphere was so unusual that even the people around them noticed and were surprised. The brothers summoned a dark cloud from which countless wasps flew out. It turned out to be black magic. The surrounding people began to panic because they could not see anything around in this dark cloud. The boy immediately realized that their magic was very strong and therefore it was necessary to attack quickly, without delay. One of the brothers, with a grin, asks if Will is ready for battle and calls the opponent to battle. Will promised himself to find a way to stop their somewhat forbidden technique without embarrassment. If they used black magic, then most likely the management would have a lot of questions for them later. Will stands calmly and, stretching his hand to the side, calls on his magic. A white light appears on his palm, and Will says that the guys do not cause any significant problems for him at all. One of the brothers starts laughing loudly and hysterically and asks the boy what he can do with his meager and unimpressive magic. At that moment, Will launches the ball of light that formed a few moments ago into the dark cloud. Will concentrates and says that he will need a little more time. Literally a moment later, the magic ball breaks into a huge space and becomes fiery. It turns out that the ability of this magic circle is to absorb worldly insects and then incinerate them. Will was immensely happy and proud that the quickly planned trick worked. The brothers were extremely displeased and looked at the boy with surprise because he destroyed their magic with one movement of his hand. They did not believe that such a thing was even possible against their unimaginable power. The Worms brothers got really angry and started releasing magic tricks without stopping, trying to impress the boy as much as possible. They decided to do everything to make Will lose faith in himself. The brothers released earth and wind magic. These forces are completely different in attributes, but they are quite similar in strength. Meanwhile, a wind whirlwind and stone spikes crawling out of the ground were heading towards Will. Will skillfully dodges first the stone spikes and then the wind flow. He admits that one of the moves almost hit him. The brothers decide to quickly use another spell before Will gets out of the cycle of attacks. Ivan's guardians are the god of insects and the god of the earth, and tall brother Dan's are the god of wind and the god of the earth. Will has a couple of questions for the brothers' guardians. He promises that next time he gets to the world of the deities, he will definitely ask why they chose these brothers. The people around were amazed because the boy copes with 2 pillars perfectly. This sight was incredible. Another man picked up the idea and said that in a few moments the duel will be over because the boys have almost run out of magic. The examiner stood silently to the side and thought that the outcome of the battle had long been predetermined for both sides. A girl came up to the organizer from the side and asked with genuine interest how Will Worm's battle was going. The guy assumes that Ari approached him. The girl objects with displeasure, adjusts her scarf and says that she is Artie. The organizer turns to the girl and says that she can see everything with her own eyes, she just has to wait for the result. The two discuss the magical attack that will use to strengthen the physical circulation of magic. It was truly amazing because it was beyond the power of a child. The guys wondered how he used it then. The examiner confirms that the boy maneuvered and, having dodged the attacking blow, knocked the opponent to the ground. This cannot be done in a second, and with proper concentration, it takes years of hard training. The organizer notices and tells the girl that with Will's strength, he can knock down not only a person, but also a large animal. Artie looks closely at the boy, who is stubbornly fighting in a duel. At this point, the guy continues and says that Will very quickly saved a 3-year-old child from being hit, reacting instantly and not even getting a single scratch. The organizer believes that the girl also noticed this moment a long time ago. Artie turns around and says that she needs to step away for a while. The organizer doesn't quite understand and asks curiously why the girl isn't interested in seeing who wins the duel and watches her go. It seemed to everyone that the fight had long since ended. Will confidently asks his opponents if their guardians have really run out of steam so quickly. The brothers immediately turned to Will with sarcasm. The boy said that it was time to end this performance, and the magic on his palm began to gradually fade. Instead of weak fading magic, 2 flaming balls appear. The Worm's brothers look at the magic that appeared with confusion. They did not understand what kind of substance appeared from the boy's palm. It was something with water. While they were looking at the magic spheres, Will asked if they wanted to play with him for a while using magic. Without waiting for an answer, the boy threw the magic spheres towards the brothers and pointed his fingers in the direction of the attack. 2 slightly shapeless magic spheres hit the target, right in the faces of the Worm's brothers. It turned out to be a water trap. The water enveloped the brothers' heads and they were forced to hold their breath to avoid drowning. Will, meanwhile, set a condition. If the brothers did not admit defeat, they could very well suffocate. Will asks again because he thought the brothers didn't hear him. He points out that the brothers have 4 guardian deities and they can't handle one who uses the simplest of techniques. Will thinks that they should train hard to be able to fight back. Then his attention is drawn to that the brothers unexpectedly decided to drink the water spheres. Will hadn't thought this through. The Worm's brothers drank all the water and their bellies immediately became much bigger. They were saying that the boy shouldn't think that they could be dealt with so easily. Will said that he did not intend to give up just by seeing their swollen bellies. The brothers were surprised by such a sudden conclusion, and a loud voice was heard from the side calling for the duel to end. The boy understood the indication of the end of the duel and began to control the magic again. Suddenly, water began to gurgle in Dan's stomach. Both brothers clutched their stomachs. They really needed to go to the toilet. The boy understands because they drank a lot of liquid. He tells the boys that they better give up and run to the toilet before it's too late. Ivan, with countless beads of sweat appearing on his face, says that he would never do that. The brothers literally started screaming that it would have been better if the boy had dealt with them using other methods. Will thought that they had completely lost their minds and reminded them that right now they could relieve themselves here, in front of their opponent, during a duel. After these sudden but quite obvious words of the boy, the Worms brothers suddenly feel sick to their stomachs, but they are no longer able to control their bodies. A terrible stench began to spread around the Worms brothers, which immediately attracted a cloud of annoying insects. Tears began to flow from the boys' eyes, and their eyes began to roll upward. Ivan and Dan understand that they have completely disgraced themselves in front of crowds of people. The people around them looked on with disapproval and noted that this was a very pitiful sight and a complete disappointment for the brothers from the famous family. At this point, Will realizes that he humiliated the guys in front of everyone and maybe he overdid it a little. The people around him were saying the same thing, that the guys should definitely be ashamed and they should have given up much earlier. Seeing the face of one of the brothers, the boy realized that he had done the right thing after all. After all, they themselves had stubbornly insisted on fighting him. Will noticed that the Worms brothers were still stubborn and still did not accept defeat. Then Will grabbed the impudent brothers by the collars of their shirts and pulled them sharply towards him. He ordered them not to dare to come near him or his sister again. The Worms brothers were already in complete horror from such a loud statement and the boy's menacing appearance, and because of this they were unable to say anything in response, as if they had kept their mouths shut. The boy said loudly that the fight was now definitely over. Will knows it was a bit cruel to cast the scary voice with magic, but he thinks the boys definitely deserved it. Will is the last to address the boys, asking with some confusion if their deities are worthy of being their guardians. While the boy was holding the hooligans by the shirts, suddenly a strange light glow began to appear around his hands. Then the organizer came up and asked Will if he was okay. The boy said yes, and then the organizer stepped into the duel arena and announced the end of the duel. The guy raises the boy's hand and says that Will has won. Will confesses to the organizer that he is very sorry about this. The boy sincerely offers to help with cleaning the ring. The examiner admits that there is no need for this and they can handle it themselves without anyone's help. And suddenly the organizer's attention is drawn to Artie, who has brought two people in robes with her. The two mysterious persons asked Will Worms to follow them right behind. One of the people who came gave an order to the examiner that the exam was not cancelled and asked him to take care of it. The guy stood up straight and listened attentively to the instructions. In addition, the man in the robe said that Artie would supervise the work. The boy still insisted on helping with the tedious cleaning of the ring before the exams. In return, he only received that he should not worry about such trifles. Artie begins to explain that the golem will clean the room automatically, you just need to press the switch. Will was amazed by such technology. While Artie was showing the golem, the two in the robes called the boy to follow them. Artie looked down and sheepishly thanked the boy for his kindness of heart. He said that the girl shouldn't be thanked because of him the Worms brothers had dirty the entire exam ring. Will apologized again for everything turning out this way and he couldn't prevent it. As he was leaving, the boy called his pets, his faithful guides, Run Run and Fury Fury, and went on. He is accompanied by two people in robes. They are good at hiding their magical abilities, but the boy has a feeling that something is wrong. Most likely they are blocking their power so Will cannot feel it. If these mysterious people are more than just one organization, then that would be further proof that Artie is their apprentice. They definitely want to defeat the monster of disaster, Will has no doubt about it. The people with the boy reached a certain place and pointed to the entrance. In front of Will, it would seem, there was an ordinary corridor and a window. Nearby on the wall hangs a collection of combat swords which the boy remembers because these swords belong to someone. Will is distracted from his deep thoughts by a girl who has taken the hood of her robe off her head and jumps on his back, screaming about how long it has been since they last saw each other. With boundless joy and a smile on her face, she addresses him as a master. The girl notes that Will has become very nice. The boy, in response, asks her to loosen her grip and let him go. The girl hugs Will tightly from behind and says that she really wanted to meet her teacher. At this time, he looks at the collection of swords, remembering that these swords were once used by Zenobia. Will has absolutely no doubt that this lively girl, who almost cries and hugs the boy tighter and tighter, is Zenobia, and she knows exactly who the boy was in his past life. Will analyzes all the facts and begins to say that, apparently, the girl is Zenobia. She happily agrees, not at all going to get off Will's back. Will starts scolding the girl, which completely takes her aback. He didn't understand, otherwise why and for what purpose would he run up and hug a stranger from behind, to which Zenobia only looks at her teacher in shock. He continues to reproach her further and say that, in addition to everything, they have never looked at each other's faces. Suddenly the girl could hug someone she might not want to see at all. Bitter tears poured from Zenobia's eyes. She lowered her head and at that moment began to sincerely justify herself by saying that she had immediately and without error sensed that it was her teacher. Will began to calm the girl down. At this moment, a second man in a robe comes up from behind and, removing his large hood, asks for the opportunity to explain himself to Will. The man who came was, without a doubt, Milt. The man understands and agrees that a lot of time has passed since the last meeting with the master. Will notices that he felt energy as soon as the man removed the hood of his robe. Such exceptional and unusual magic could only belong to Milt. The man smiles warmly and asks if the boy is surprised. He explains that 4 of his students are currently acting as the president of this academy. Milt says that he immediately recognized the master through identification and through another object. This item turned out to be the magic scroll that Milt pulled out. The scroll is attached to the questionnaire to measure the amount of magical power of the test subject in advance. Indeed, Will had filled out this form before. The boy recalls that when he filled out this form, he realized that it was very similar to a magic scroll. Milt says that he was immediately sent this scroll so that he could make sure that it was indeed the master. At first, Milt thought that a child had been born who had simply adopted the qualities of their beloved master. Milta interrupts Zenobia and explains that this is precisely why they decided to observe the master for a while. To keep an eye on Will, they sent Artie to him to keep an eye on the boy and accompany him everywhere. Will begins to suspect that Artie is Zenobia's student and generously praises his charge. Zenobia proudly admits that it is her duty to raise a student as worthy as their master raised. Milt says that if he were a child who inherited the qualities of a master, he would follow his teacher without the slightest hesitation. Will objects and says that Milt would, without any objection, become a good teacher. Milt had heard somewhere that the guardian deity was considered an apostle, and it seemed that the gods loved those annoying worms' brothers very much, since they stayed with them no matter what. Will, in turn, was amazed that Milt had not changed at all. Milt explains that he then, in a mad rush, checked the history of the measuring device's log. It turned out that the child was the unconditional reincarnation of the master, and that he was an apostle. At this point, a thought dawns on Will. He doesn't remember the goddess warning him about this. He only remembers her hoping that the boy would behave well because he was an apostle, and asking him not to forget that. Milt says that in the duel he remembered how the master once showed him a spell that would definitely destroy the opponent. Will used it to give the opponent diarrhea. He remembers how the master used the same tricks in his past life. Will is surprised that he used this abomination in his past life. And thanks to this they recognized their master, to which Will replies that this is only the 8th argument. And he adds that he has enough stories from that life in stock by which one can definitely recognize him. The girl does not understand what stories the master means. When Zenobia was about 5 years old, she asked Will to shave half of her head. The girl confirmed this with shining eyes, remembering such moments. Zenobia took the boy by the shoulders and asked him to put aside the details because more than 200 years had passed. She led him aside and said that it was time to get some new stories. The girl was very interested in what the master did when he was in heaven. Will admits that the goddess told him about the current situation, but unfortunately he now has about 8 years of knowledge in total. Zenobia enthusiastically asks him to tell her everything. Milt watches and certainly understands that. The boy listens to everything but does not fully grasp the situation. A couple of hours later, Will understands what was said. He mentions the Tinebris cult. Milt confirms and says that they, the rescue party, were created to fight this cult. During the conversation, Run was contentedly eating food from a plate. However, knowing that the Beast of Calamity is not dead, the first priority now is to prevent its resurrection. Will wonders if even such a powerful organization as the rescue squad cannot stop the cult's actions. Milt explains that most of the fanatics are ordinary, unremarkable people, but as it turns out, at the center of it all is a demon who has the ability to control them. Will asks who this demon is. Milt explains to the boys that demons are very powerful creatures. They are definitely not the kind of creatures that have strong life and magical powers that can be easily subdued. If a person's fighting power is compared to a medium-sized dog, then the fighting power of demons is that of a lion. Even disciples who somehow become the strongest warriors in the future cannot defeat him due to his unimaginable strength. Milt says that some information was not confirmed before the master's death. The thing is, even more powerful demons appeared, but they were able to defeat them with the help of 4 students. Will couldn't believe what he heard. Milt goes on to say that these demons were once the same fanatics who worshipped the beast of disaster. However, their power increased and they became uncontrollable monsters. Will did not believe that a person could become a demon. He sincerely admits that despite the fact that he trained to defeat the monster of disasters, he feels that it is now too much for him. Milt counters that they are very happy that they have finally found a master. Milt says that they are very interested to hear Will's story, especially the master's training in heaven. The boy asks again and reminds that he did return after 100 years. Milt smirks and says that time has flown by and he's not that young guy anymore. Will smirks and says that even though Milt is 120 years old, he still looks like he's about 60. Milt, with a serious expression, says that his appearance is supported by an internal magical power, so he does not look his age. Tears appear in the man's eyes and he touchingly pronounces the name of the master. Zenobia laughed and asked the man if he had been holding back his emotions all this time. Milt agreed and asked if he could finally cry since he thought he would never find a master. The girl allowed him and decided to say something for the future. She thinks it would be better for the master to become a student at the academy and hide his eventful past. Will objects and says that he needs to pass the entrance exams first and that joining the academy without a reason would be cheating. The image of the duel organizer comes to mind. The guy said that Will defeated 2 students with 4 deities. The exquisite maneuvering of fire and water balls is also a master class. The examiner will recommend Will for enrollment. He said that Will is good at everything, so he will pass without exams. Milt took the drink in his hands and asked to notify Dion and Regin that the master was here. Will wonders how he could lead them. Milt explains that he uses a summoning ring he created himself for this purpose. He promises to give the ring to the master a little later. Will is surprised that the man could create something like this. The boy says that, as with the measuring device, Milt is simply excellent. The man is very proud of his work and tears start flowing from his eyes again. He apologizes and justifies himself by saying that he has very weak tear glands. The man moves his hand, describing an even circle, and explains that first you need to open this ring, and then press on the pattern and contact Dion and Redina. Milt checks the connection and asks if everything is okay with the people on the other end of the call. The people on the other end of the call respond that everything is fine with them and the connection is quite good. Dion, being on the battlefield, explains that Milt has finally contacted them and asks with interest what important news they want to tell him urgently. On the same battlefield, a girl in armor and a large bat, Regina, passes by and asks to speak a little briefly because she is a little busy. Having heard all the recommendations, Milt, listening in this way, asked to listen to him very carefully. Milt states that the master has been reborn and has appeared with 2 divine beasts. On the other end of the call, Regina and Dion ask if the master is near Milt. They ask the master to say something if he can hear them, so they can hear his voice. Will approaches the magic ring and touchingly recalls the names of his friends. He says that not even 100 years have passed. Dion clearly didn't expect this turn of events because so much time had passed since the master had passed away. Will says that he is very happy to hear their voices. He promises to tell all the events in much more detail during a personal meeting. The guys agree and reciprocate that they are also happy to hear their master. Will hangs up and says that he'll see the guys soon. Milt explains this by saying that time has already run out. After a few seconds of conversation, the boy has no doubt that after 100 years, all the guys have not changed at all. Will noted that Milt was still the same crybaby, and the man immediately felt awkward. A female voice was heard behind the door. Artie asked if she could come in. Zenobia gave her permission and the door swung open and the girl walked confidently into the room. Zenobia immediately began to explain to her student with great interest that Will would continue to study here, so Artie would look after him and should always be close to the boy. Zenobia explains to her student that Will is going to become a student and a member of the rescue squad. Therefore, Artie must make sure that he does not disgrace their honor. Artie, meanwhile, wonders if the boy can even join so easily. Zenobia gently places her hand on her student's shoulder and says that she has no doubt in her abilities, so she counts on her to help the boy. The student agrees without arguing. The girl became a little sad, but a moment later she said that she had one small suggestion and asked permission to voice it. Artie, with a confident expression and attitude, asks Zenobia and Milt if she can also study at the academy with Will. Zenobia did not expect such a question at all and was surprised by Artie's proposal. The one who entered explained that she had already spoken to examinees as an assistant in the management of the examination, and there was nothing more natural in being a student who had long ago decided to become an assistant director. She asks and hopefully seeks confirmation of her thoughts from the teacher. Zenobia patted the student on the head with some concern and said that this was undoubtedly an excellent idea. The girl happily thanked her teacher. Zenobia turns to Will and asks if he agrees to Artie's interesting idea. Will agrees without further ado. Even if it is done to hide his identity, the boy is no stranger to this manner of communication. Will and Artie shake hands. The boy is incredibly happy that he will have the opportunity to cooperate with the girl. She also reciprocates. Zenobia asks, not without interest, if Artie brought her any important reports. The girl remembers the report that contained all the information about the exam. Artie reports that the exam went off without a hitch, with 30 people selected to pass the threshold. Milt points out that the situation is quite normal for such an event. Zenobia asks sternly if anyone had any serious injuries during or before the exam. Artie remembers Dan and Ivan Worms, who were seriously injured. Will begins to worry that his attacks could have such serious consequences. Artie reassures him, saying that they undoubtedly received these injuries after the boy defeated them. Once they came to their senses, they decided to teach the master a lesson again and take revenge, leaving the hospital wing to find Will. They somehow found a large jar of poisonous insects and wanted to pour them on the master. However, things did not go according to plan, and the worms, for some reason, were unable to control the rampant insects. The poisonous bugs immediately crawled over their bodies and bit them hard, leaving numerous wounds. Eventually, they were taken back to hospital beds and are now undergoing treatment. Eventually, they don't even have the strength to get out of bed. Artie wonders if they'll try to escape again and find the master. It's only a matter of time. In any case, the Worms brothers can't see anything now because their faces are damaged. The examiner doesn't envy their guardian deities at all. Artie suddenly announces that Ivan and Dan Worms are currently at pole number 0. Zenobia and Milt look at the girl in bewilderment. Milt and Zenobia begin to talk and argue heatedly with each other. The man and the girl do not understand how an ordinary person can somehow mysteriously contact an apostle. Milt estimates that the chances of them being able to contact him are about 0%. Both ask the master if such an outcome is possible, almost whispering. At this time, Will thinks that it is worth asking the deities directly about this. Will found himself in the world of the deities. The master is met by the same goddess who spoke to him last time, and she asks him, not without interest, whether he used the device she gave him earlier again. The goddess asks why he came. She guesses that Will probably wants to ask about those distant relatives. The guy does not quite understand how the goddess guessed this and asks if she really was spying on him all this time. She replied with embarrassment that it just happened that way. The goddess points her finger gracefully upward and asks Will curiously if he knows why he didn't receive the blessing. After a moment, she continues and says that it all happened precisely because Will himself removed it. After all, at one point he declared that he did not even deserve to touch 2 deities with his hands. Will recalls this incident and believes that perhaps he really did say these words once. The goddess reminds Will that he is a true apostle. In other words, a messenger of God. Will does not quite understand and asks with an interested look if an apostle can have such an ability. The goddess explains that if the gods had not disturbed her during her last encounter with Will, she would have been able to explain it all properly. She reminds him that at that moment she was trying to tell the boy everything. He asks, not without interest, what these apostles resemble. The girl explains that she will have to tell him the next time he visits her. Will is very curious about why the Worms brothers had 4 deities. The goddess smirks sweetly and realizes that the boy has not changed at all over time. She explains that the gods cannot choose a person based on their qualities. They are not interested in the individuality of a person, and they simply help them because that is how it should be. In some ways, this can even be considered irresponsible. The goddess says that she is also far from omnipotent. She emphasizes that such a situation is quite funny, since even the most unfortunate people are protected by deities. The boy certainly agrees with her words. Will's appearance in the divine world begins to slowly dissolve and lose its clear outlines, and the goddess guesses that it is time for the boy to return to his world. She regrets with sadness in her soul that she will again remain here in deep loneliness. Despite this, she still insistently asks the boy not to look into this world too often, and the master is interested in the reason for such a request. The goddess explains that if he comes to this world often, his consciousness will sooner or later become clouded and he will die. Will realize that this is actually a serious problem. The goddess informs him that she will definitely figure out a way to contact her later in such a way that his foot will not step into their world, since he is not yet a god. After Will visits the world of the gods, Milt says that the master really has a lot of power. He explains that this all happened because of reincarnation. Milt explains that the time axis between the worlds is different, which is why humans can't stay there for long. Will finds this a plus, saying that it will give him practice. Later, Will was told about his plans for the future. After saying goodbye to the guys, he returned to Saria. A few days later, Will is sitting in the park with his little sister, Saria, while she plays with her favorite pets. Will recalls Milt's words that the result will be announced in a week and the long-awaited ceremony will take place on the same day. So the boy must be ready. Will did not understand why he was so relaxed. The boy is distracted from his thoughts by his sister. She picks up the cat and asks her brother to pay attention to her. Will insistently asks the girl not to go too far. The boy closes his eyes with peace and understands that here he can be alone with his thoughts for a while and not worry about anything at all. An image of a mysterious girl in a hat appears next to the boy. She, having found Will, exclaimed with great joy that he was exactly what she needed. She shook Will's hand firmly, and he guessed that this was the woman who was attacked in the forest last time. The girl says that she definitely does not have the words to express all her gratitude for the help in that dangerous moment. She was about to start telling the story when the boy interrupted her and asked her to stop the endless stream of words. He explains his actions by saying that the girl simply needed help at that moment, so he volunteered to help her. He introduces himself to the girl as Will Worms. She folds her hands in front of her and asks if this is the boy from the most famous Worms family. The man in armor standing behind the girl chuckled, reminding the lady of the rules of decency. She immediately apologized for not introducing herself earlier. She crouched down slightly, lifting the hem of her colorful dress. She introduced herself as the third princess of the Ermati family, Tina Daya Ermati. She says that it is a great honor for her to meet Will. The kingdom of Baryadoa, adjacent to the northeast, is the Ermati Empire. The master always had good relations with the Ermati emperors in his past life. However, a second name is quite rare in the royal family. The girl explains that the name Daya was given to her by Lord Dion the other day. The girl also explains that students always receive the middle names of their teachers. For example, the student of Edelphus, Edelcenobia, and Zinandione receives the middle name Daya. The boy notes that at such a young age she received a middle name, which means she is worthy of praise. The girl admits that the third princess is unlikely to inherit the throne. Therefore, she is very happy to end up in this academy on the recommendation of Lord Dion and receive a proper education here. Zaria approaches her brother and calls him. Will introduces his little sister to Tina. The pets are not left without attention either. The girl in the hat bends down in front of the girl and smiles sweetly, greeting her. Will explains that Tina is now their friend, so they need to be friendly to her. Tina is very surprised. After all, the guy said that they were friends now. Tina had no friends at school, and this moment made her happy without the slightest doubt. She tilted her head so that the huge brim of her hat covered her eyes. The girl took Will's palms in her own and said decisively that she would definitely not cause any problems. She was incredibly happy to make friends with the boy and his company. During this confession, Tina was already called. The girl said that she was very sorry to say goodbye like this. Saria waved her hand sweetly to the girl, and she said that they would definitely see each other again. The guy was surprised that a number of people in uniform bowed to him. He receives a bow from the king's soldiers, some of them smirking faintly. One of them asked Her Highness Tina for something. Will notice this familiar face. Saria, with a deeply concerned expression on her face, asks what happened to her brother, to which she receives the answer that everything is fine with him and the girl has nothing to worry about. He lovingly offers his little sister Saria something to play with, stroking her head. The girl is extremely happy with this offer and exclaims contentedly. While the brother was spending time with his sister, they were being watched by a silhouette standing behind a tree nearby. This silhouette turned out to be an unfamiliar person with cat ears and sharp claws in rather unusual clothes. While Saria slept peacefully on the bench, not knowing any worries, Will and Artie were training hard. The boy extended his hands in front of him, and the girl held the hilt of the sword tightly in her hands. Both students were already completely exhausted, but despite the overwhelming fatigue, they were still even more determined to continue their intense and persistent training. After some preparation, Artie swung the ball, putting her hands behind her head. Before Will could blink, a sharp sword blade appeared in front of him in an instant. The boy stopped the girl's incredibly fast strike by grabbing the sword between his two palms. Will held the sword in his hands for a moment, then moved as close as possible to Artie. With one deft movement, he grabbed her by the shoulder and threw her to the ground. The girl managed to group her body and skillfully land on her knees. She was amazed that with one easy movement, Will stopped her rapid attack. Meanwhile, Will raised his sword and at the same moment pointed it at the girl. Then Artie said that she was still forced to surrender. It seems that now she truly understands why the teacher called Will a master. The boy is happy that he and Artie had a full training session. At the end of the training, the sister wakes up and yawns loudly. The girl rubs her sleepy eyes sweetly and says that she is already awake. Seeing Artie with her brother, she greeted the girl, and after a few moments, sad tears appeared in her eyes. Saria was upset because she slept through the entire game of Artie with her brother. Will turns to the girl and asks if it's time for her to leave. Artie agrees and nods, putting her sword back in its sheath. Saria approaches Artie and, almost crying, asks if she is in a hurry. The girl pulls Artie and asks her if she can play with her a little longer. Artie was struck by the touching look of the girl, who was almost in tears because Artie was about to leave. Artie agreed to stay, but only for a little while. The girl exclaimed with joy, and so the week flew by. The results of the entrance exams have been posted for a long time. Will already knows them all. The boy decides to pretend that he is looking at the results, otherwise the other students might suspect him of something. Saria asks her brother with genuine curiosity if his name is there, and Will agrees. Will notices that Ivan and Dan's names are not on the lists. He is distracted from his thoughts by a voice greeting the boy. He turns around, and he sees a girl with cat ears and claws. She confidently raises her hand up as a friendly greeting and calls herself Rosetta. The girl standing behind Rosetta is her sister, whose name is Rose. Rose smiles and immediately rushes to hug Saria. It is immediately obvious that she is happy to see her friend. At this time, Will is surprised and asks if his sister knows this girl. Saria explains to her brother that she has already played with her and asks her brother, not without interest, if he remembers the day when it happened. Will remembers this moment and says that he is also glad to see the girl. Will thanks Rosetta for taking care of his sister, and Rosetta explains that Rose is happy to have found and made a new friend. Rosetta happily says that she passed the entrance exam, so from this year onwards she will also study at this academy. Will praises her and says that it is very good. He knows about it, that Rosetta was following him and his sister last time. Rosetta looks at the boy in surprise and asks curiously how he knew about it. Will explains that he didn't feel threatened, so he didn't worry about it. The girl scratches behind her ear and says that she was just a little worried after hearing their conversation. Will asks Rosetta not to apologize because he would have done exactly the same thing in her place. Will extends his hand to the girl and says that if their sisters are friends, he also sincerely hopes to get along with Rosetta. The girl extends her hand and shakes it. She completely agrees with the boy's words. Saria notices that her brother is also very happy to meet her, and Rose notices that her older sister and Will look very happy. Rosetta turned to the girls and, blushing, asked them not to embarrass her. At this time, Run Run and Fury Fury had just woken up. The long-awaited day of the enlightenment ceremony has arrived. In the big building, all the important people gathered. The lady in the hat, probably Tina, with responsibility and a little excitedly reads a speech from the book. It was time for the briefing, a short press conference of an informative nature for the first-year students. The information that was important to tell the newly arrived students was written on the board. Afterwards, there was a general meeting where the newly admitted students exchanged information of interest to them with each other. Next is a lunch break where you can discuss the hottest and freshest news. Rosetta reports that she thinks her village has been attacked by a demon. That is why she sincerely wants to help in the hunt for its capture, but for this she needs people who will be able to help. The girl told her story, then she decided to say that her guardian is the god of hunting, so she is not very good at fighting and strategy. She sadly says that her deity is not at all suitable for battles. Will decides to join the girl because he can't leave his new friend in trouble. Rosetta is very happy and with the most genuine sincerity thanked her new friend. The boy says that if they are going to go there, they need to put together a team where the guys will have both magic and weapons. During this conversation, Rose Spoon feeds Saria something tasty. After some time, the boy and Rosetta met Tina and Artie. Will decides to introduce Rosetta to the girls. He explains that Artie and Tina are excellent swordsmen and mages and suggests that Rosetta has met them in class. Tina blushes and tells the boy that he praises her too much. Will analyzes his team of friends. They have a swordsman, a hunter, a mage, and a healer. He proudly believes that they will make a pretty good team. Artie whispers to Will that they have received Zenobia's permission, so they can now leave the academy without hindrance. Will thanks Artie for the good news. Rosetta was determined to move forward. Tina and Rosetta raised their hands in the air, confidently intending to set out. Now they were definitely ready to get rid of the evil and terrifying demon. At this time, crows were cawing shrilly in the forest. The head of one of the wolves was not far from his body. The demon was already on the trail of Will and his team. A team of friends walks through a huge, dense forest, which is located on the territory of the palace. Tina sings a happy song about the incident, and Will comments that she looks pretty happy. Tina says that it all looks like just a fun walk with friends. Will understands the girl and says that he is as happy as she is. Tina says that if something happens to the team, she will be able to patch up any wound because she is a good healer. Will said that the whole team will definitely count on her. Will decides to ask the girl if she can heal, then most likely her guardian is the god of water. The girl confirms the boy's guess with a smile on her face. The girl starts counting her gods on her fingers. She lists the gods of thunder, air, fire, ice, and so on. Will was clearly shocked. It turned out that there were only 8 pillars, including the human one. Tina explains that she has a high percentage of love, which is why she owns these deities. She tries to console the boy by saying that there are talented people like him who only need one deity to be cool. The guy smiles softly and asks her to stop. Will asks Rosetta that her guardian is the god of hunting. The girl agrees. And it says that she is an excellent bowman and can also recognize the tracks of absolutely any creature. In this case, they will quickly find the demon, and this is much more encouraging for the team. Rosetta points her hand to the side and asks the team to pay attention in the indicated direction. In the distance, a residential village can be seen through the trees. The girl looks quickly at the village. She explains that its inhabitants earn their living by hunting and selling sheep. It is a great place to live. Will noted that the girl was right. The village really did seem like a great place. The people in this village were going about their normal daily work. Rosetta waves her hand cheerfully and happily greets the residents. One of the guys turns around and asks in surprise if it was really Rosetta who appeared in front of them. Residents ask the girl if she returned too quickly. Some even assumed that the girl had failed the entrance exam. Rosetta reassured her acquaintances and said that she had passed the exams and entered the academy. Immediately after this news, sincere congratulations were heard from all sides. The people around them say that Rosetta is the pride of their village. Will understands that they have come to the girl's native village. The girl proudly points her palm at her new friends. She would like to introduce her village to the boys. She introduces them as the magician Will, the swordsman Artie, and the healer Tina. All the kids were very pleased to meet the inhabitants of Rosetta's home village. The people around were very happy that Rosetta had made real friends. The elder approached Will and shook his hand, saying that he was very pleased to meet the boy in person. Rosetta declares that they have come to destroy the demon. The people around them nodded approvingly and sincerely praised the guys, saying that they are great guys for deciding on such a bold and courageous act. The elder turns to Tina. He says that the villagers have approached the guild to ask for adventurers to help them. The man thanks the party for coming. In response, Tina can only squeal happily and say that she is a friend of Rosetta. Will asks the elder if his team can learn more about the demon. The elder begins his story. The one who first saw this beast said that it appeared in the pastures. He was herding sheep with his dog and did not even notice how the demon appeared in front of him. The shepherd ran in fear as fast as he could to the village, trying to call all his sheep to follow him. However, the demon still managed to drag many away and also somehow mysteriously got hold of the village's crops and ruined the harvest. After leaving the village, the boys headed to the place where the demon was first seen. Rosetta found something with her searching skills and called her friends to look at it. There were huge footprints of a demon bear on the ground. The footprints went in one direction and Rosetta pointed out the direction of the creature. The girl suggested that the bear could return to its den and this must be tracked down. The boys reached the clearing. It seemed that they had found a bear because the tracks ended at a huge cave. It is likely that there is a demon inside her. Tina looked at him in surprise and asked if the boys could use magic this time. Rosetta was surprised and asked, not without interest, how this could be done. Rosetta points out that this is what you would expect from Tina, and Will confirms this and says that there is room for Tina's strategy, too. Rosetta explains that when the demon comes out of the cave, the guys must stop it with the help of a bow and Tina's magic. She confidently agrees and asks to leave this matter to her. Rosetta continues and says that Artie will then attack him with a sword and will be there in case something goes wrong. Everyone agreed with the proposed strategy. The boys took their battle positions and prepared for the attack. Rosetta asked if everyone was ready and without hesitation began the countdown, starting from 3. Tina began to call upon her magic and the operation began. A huge fireball descended from the sky and headed towards the cave. Will understands that indeed such magic is only possible for a mage with excessive love. Tina's magical power and firepower are much stronger than any other mage. At this time, Tina doubted a little because it seemed to her that she had overdone it a little with the power, and she needed to make the ball a little smaller, otherwise there would be a fire. A terrible roar comes from the cave and a demon bear jumps out with great force. The creature, jumping out of the fire, flies straight at the team of boys. Rosetta was shocked by how huge the demon bear was. At that moment, Artie immediately stepped forward, drawing his sword from its sheath in a second. The girl pulled out her sword and pointed the tip towards the demon. She dealt with him in just a few moments. Artie carefully folded her sword and said that everything was ready. Tina began to apologize and explained her behavior by saying that she was scared and confused when she saw how huge the bear was. The girls on the team began to praise Artie for her skills. Rosetta admits that despite her good eyesight and attentiveness, she still failed to notice the demon. Artie dealt with it in no time. Will was extremely happy with such brilliant results because this was to be expected from his student. Artie said that this bear had a huge body, and Rosetta also noticed this. The girl approached the bear and said that Artie was right. The fur was thick at first glance, without a doubt, but in fact it was quite thin. Will thought that it was not a bear eating the sheep at all and asked Rosetta about this supposed situation. She thought it was strange and decided to go into the cave anyway. Will told Artie that he and Rosetta would go and inspect everything in the cave, and the girls had to deal with the bear in the meantime. Rosetta suggested that the remaining girls take her sharp object into service. After some time, Rosetta and Will emerge from the cave and apologize for being there for so long. Rosetta explains that there were no bones or other objects in the cave. The cave was empty. It is likely that the sheep were eaten by a completely different demon. Tina explains that they will need to find another creature before it eats someone else. During the conversation, Artie was examining the bear's claw. She was amazed at how huge it was. There was a divided bear carcass lying in the clearing. Will was amazed by what he saw and said that the girls had done a great job. Artie, not hiding his curiosity, asked what the guys were going to do with it. Will comes up with a clever idea to take the bear parts to Rosetta's village. He believes that the animal's carcass will be excellent compensation for all the damage caused. The girls confidently supported the idea. The boys turned to Rosetta and asked if everything was okay. The girl looked down and small drops of tears appeared in her eyes. She sincerely thanked her friends for their good attitude towards her and her homeland. Will suggested collecting everything and taking it to the village, and the villagers would figure out what to do with the bear. Its fur is quite large and heavy, and Rosetta decided to take only it, since the meat could be poisoned by the demon. At this moment, Fury jumps out of Will's hands with a cheerful expression on his face. The boy couldn't hold on to his pet, and he quickly galloped away from the boys. The satisfied slime deftly jumps inside the animal. The three boys watched the monster's actions attentively. After that, the slime suddenly expands and completely absorbs the remains of the animal. The guys were very surprised by the slime's abilities. A moment later, the monster dissolved the remains of the animal inside its body. One of the travelers noticed how the animal's meat quickly disappeared into the slime's body. One of the girls added that after absorption, only fur and fangs remain in the slime's body, while another was surprised to see excrement inside the monster. The satisfied slime finished the digestion process. One of the guys noticed that it looked more like a large humus, however, he was not sure that such a thing could happen in the slime's body. After this, the girl in the hat began to hug the slime, saying that it met her expectations. Her friend was confused by the girl's actions. The beast woman looked at the boy in surprise and asked him if slime could digest a demon so easily. She added that she did not believe in it and suggested that it was a new species. The young man awkwardly noted that she knew little about his ability. The boy suggested that the boys go and look around the pasture again so as not to miss a single clue. He added that they might have overlooked something. The beast woman supported his suggestion. After some time, the boys came to the pasture. One of the boys reminded that the demon bear came from there. The beast woman leaned down to the ground and informed her companions that there were tracks of sheep in this place as well as tracks of a demon, and they matched. The girl added that this meant that they all came from there. The young man suggested that they go further and take a look. The boys went into the forest, and on their way the beast woman noticed something unusual. The girl said that there were wolf tracks on the ground and suggested that they were also demons. The boy suggested that the sheep had been stolen by wolves, not a bear. The girl replied that if the wolves were a pack, they would have grappled with the bear to steal the sheep. She then added that the tracks were still fresh, which meant they were heading somewhere. The boy said that hunting sheep is not difficult at all, after which the beast woman drew the boy's attention to the identical tracks, which indicated that the sheep were traveling together. The young man asked if this was possible without a shepherd. The girl noticed something suspicious in the tracks. She said in surprise that there were 11 sheep. The young man replied that this was impossible and suggested that the girl had made a mistake and should recount everything. The beast woman replied that her calculations were correct and suggested that the boys continue to follow the tracks. The tracks led the boys to a cave, which is why the company assumed that the sheep had run into this cave. The girl noticed that there were no traces of wolves near the cave and was surprised to assume that the sheep had come here themselves and hid from the monsters. The boy asked if this was possible and added that the sheep could not have come here themselves. Tina and Artie cheerfully said that they believed their friend's words. This made Rosette happy, and she thanked the girls for their trust. After that, Rosette came closer to the cave and said that she would go and look around. The girl standing by the cave noticed something unusual and looked into the depths of the shelter. Suddenly, Rosetta was thrown back by a goat that ran out of the cave. The young man managed to catch the girl. He was surprised by what could throw her back and looked towards the cave. A small goat stood in front of the boys. The boys were very surprised by its appearance. One of the girls turned her attention to the other inhabitants of the cave. This attracted the attention of the young man. Behind the goat stood a flock of sheep. There were 10 of them. Rosetta looked at the goat warily and protected the boy from the animal. The boy assumed that the 11th track belonged to this goat. The girl replied that she would never confuse the tracks of a sheep and a goat. The young man came closer to the goat and asked him if he had protected the flock of these sheep. The goat bleated in response. This conversation greatly surprised Rosette. The young man told the goat that they had come to fight the demon bear at the request of the village and had ended up taking all the sheep, all thanks to him. He added that he wanted to take him with him and thanked the little protector. His companions were perplexed. The kid's name is Kiki, and he said he stayed with the sheep for a week to keep them out of trouble, helping them chase away wolves. After that, they ran into a cave to hide from the predators. The kid defended the herd from attacking monsters every day, so he is very proud that he did not leave and helped, but now he is very hungry. The young man's companions began to pet the kid and praise him for his courage. The hero understood that if he understood what the goat was talking about, it meant that he was not a simple animal, he was a divine animal. After that, a loud howl of a wolf was heard. It attracted the attention of the children. Hearing the howl, the boys turned around. A pack of wolves stood in front of them. They surrounded the adventurers. Seeing the enemies, the goat rushed at the wolves. This greatly surprised the hero, and he asked him to stop. The goat rammed the wolf, and the monster flew to the side. The lunge of the kid scared the rest of the enemies. Rosetta was surprised at how accurately the kid hit the target. The young man noticed the fear of the wolves and gave the order to attack them. Rosetta pulled the bowstring and aimed at the wolves. Tina and Artie did not stay aside and also attacked the enemies. The guys quickly dealt with the wolves. Rosetta noticed that there were as many wolves as tracks that they found in the forest. The boys summed up that they had destroyed the demon bear and the wolves. The sorceress joyfully announced that they had won and mentioned the power of friendship. The young man looked at his companion in shock and reminded her that they had not yet taken the sheep to the village. Behind the boys stood a slime. It was having a hard time digesting the remains of the monsters. After that, the boys quickly hurried to the village. Reaching it, they saw the inhabitants, who were happy that the sheep were safe and sound. They offered them to stay, but the boys thanked them for their hospitality and decided to leave, since Rosa and Saria were waiting for them at the academy. The boys went on, and one of Will's companions thanked them for their help. The witch girl who walked in front replied that she shouldn't worry because they had a great time, and besides, they were friends. During his procession, the young man ate cookies with gusto, adding that the souvenirs given by the residents were simply gorgeous. The girl watched the boy gobble up the sweets and asked him to share his sweets with her. Will smiled and replied that they had all done a great job, so she deserved it as much as anyone else, and handed her a cookie. The sorceress awkwardly accepted the young man's cookie. Taking the sweet in her hands, she was very embarrassed and joyfully rejoiced at the gift. The girl happily put the cookie in her mouth. Having tasted it, she noted the high quality of the sweet. Will smiled and confirmed her words. Someone was watching the guys from the side. It was a crowd of people dressed in strange rags. The sorceress sat down near the tree and said that she was very tired. The young man replied that they had not rested since they left the village. He added that they could go back to rest if she wanted. The girl gave a negative answer and said that Saria and Rose were waiting for them, so they should return home quickly. Rosetta asked Will what they would do with the kid. She added that the goat wasn't even afraid of the wolves and suggested that he too could be a monster. The young man approached the kid and began to pet him. He replied that he simply had nowhere else to go, so he took him with him. Will added that it was no trouble for him to take care of him. His words pleased Rosetta. The hero continued to stroke his pet tenderly. Suddenly, Will noticed something was wrong and turned around abruptly. A large fireball was approaching Will and his companions. The young man ordered Artie to call everyone here. Soon after, a gigantic explosion occurred. Steam was emanating from Will's magic circle. The boys took cover behind Will's magic circle. The young man said that everything happened very suddenly. It was good that they managed to take cover. The girl replied that the place next to him was the safest. After that, a gang of bandits in rags attacked the boys. Will didn't know who they were. Artie said they were cult killers. The boys supported her opinion. The mention of the cult terrified Tina. She remembered her past. Will shouted her name and brought her to her senses. The hero turned around and said with a smile that everything was fine. He asked the girl not to worry. The young man added that she just needed to use her magic and suggested that these were wolf demons in human form. Tina wiped her tears and gathered her strength. She shouted at the bandits. The attackers were pushing the girls back. Rosetta and Artie were having a hard time fighting them. Rosetta asked Will what she should do. The young man knew that the man who had created the fireball was hiding somewhere. He assumed that they would attack with the magic that the man had created. Will decided that they needed to find the source of the magic. The young man did not have time to do anything because a strong wind blew on him. His squad was already attacked by the wind magic, raging storm. The girls near him were confused, but the young man assured them that everything was fine and asked them to stay close. It was too bright around, so Will couldn't see anything. The boy decided to use the thunder flash spell. With this skill, he lifted his enemies into the air. All the opponents received their own spell while in the air. Will knew that this magic was too widespread, so it was easy to destroy. Rosetta added that they repelled it with one spell, destroying their enemies. After that, the girls turned their attention to the two remaining enemies. Artie was being pushed back. She told the boys that they were still alive, so they had to be on guard. The others were confused with the loss of their leader, but these two continued to advance. The girls prepared to attack the remaining opponents. The boys managed to fight off the enemies. Will asked Tina if she was okay. Tina gave a positive answer. The girl happily declared that they had dealt with them well, and she hoped that all their opponents were dead. Will awkwardly noted that the killers were very tenacious. The girl quickly corrected herself, saying that she wanted revenge. One of the attackers groaned and reached out his hand to Tina. The killer began to cast a spell. The killer didn't have time to strike because Kiki threw him aside. Rosetta and Will looked at the fallen bandit. The young man asked if the attacker was still alive. Rosetta answered that it was unlikely. Will assumed that he died from Kiki's blow. Rosetta looked at the goat in horror and told him that he was amazing. Artie added that he was not moving. Suddenly, the man's body rose into the air, which greatly surprised the boys. The killer's clothes began to tear. The hero's squad did not understand what was happening to him because the man was already dead. Artie commanded everyone to step back and began to bare her blade. Artie struck the bandit's giant hand and her sword broke. The girl was horrified by what happened. She said that the enemy had finally shown itself. The transformed enemy roared. A giant devil stood before the boys. The demon said that he had to thank them all because it was only thanks to them that he was able to be reborn. Will felt like he had encountered him before. The young man knew that he had experience fighting evil spirits in his past life, but he somehow missed the moment when the devil is reborn after the death of the vessel. Will realized that he was now sitting in the body of a small child. He slowly walked towards the devil, which greatly confused his partners. The boy rushed at the devil. Will's foot hit the monster's forehead, which made the latter laugh. The devil's forehead was too strong and Will's plan collapsed. The demon grabbed the hero by the leg. The demon squeezed Will's leg and said that he could crush him like a bug. He added that his childish curiosity had played a cruel joke on him. The demon threw the hero to the ground with force. This outcome greatly frightened and surprised his companions. Will's companions began to attack the demon, but their level was not enough to cause any damage to the demon. Artie's blows also did not cause damage to the monster. As a result, the devil mockingly asked the girl if she was going to cut him down. After this provocation, the devil suddenly lost his hand. The loss of the limb greatly surprised the demon. Will, standing behind him, said that his skin, although hard, could be cut. The young man held the severed hand of the devil in his hands. He added that his body was now very weak. The young warrior's condition delighted his companions. The devil held on to the rest of his arm and looked at Will in dismay. The young man added that they would now finish him off. The devil, horrified, asked the boy what he had done to him. Will responded angrily that he had simply learned that the devil was as mortal as they were. His words enraged the demon. The devil became furious with anger. He shouted at the young man not to be arrogant. The devil added in anger that he was much stronger than them and now he would destroy them all. Immediately after that, the devil's head flew off. The devil's face was in the air without losing its original grimace. Will stood behind the demon with mana concentrated in his hand. He made something like a blade out of mana. The headless devil fell behind the young man. The immediate outcome of the battle greatly surprised Rosetta and Tina. Rosetta and Tina cheerfully praised the young man, while sheepishly thanked the girls for their kind words. Artie held the rest of her sword in her hand. She said with tears in her eyes that the boy simply destroyed her as a swordsman. The boy awkwardly apologized to the swordsman. The devil grunted, which managed to attract Tina's attention. The devil's body began to dissolve rather quickly. The young man said that it was dissolving and turning into liquid and steam was coming out of the severed place. Will asked Artie if she knew what it was. The girl replied that she didn't know, but it was unlikely to be anything good. Her answer made the fry think. The young man tried to freeze the devil's body. It didn't help and the body continued to melt. After that, the hero decided to use thunder, fire, and wind magic, but they all turned out to be useless. The young man used water magic. Unlike other elements, it produced some effect on the demon's body. Because of the water, the devil's body began to shrink, and the areas where the water had hit turned black. Tina assumed that this was an indicator that everything was working. The young man exhaled and decided to proceed to the next stage of the experiments. The devil's body began to transform into something. At this time, a plate broke somewhere. It turned out that Saria's plate suddenly broke, which surprised the girls who were having lunch with her. One of them asked if everything was okay in Saria, and the other informed the warrior about the incident. The girl ran up to Saria and began to squeeze her cheeks. She said that she was very sorry and asked the girl if she was hurt. Saria replied that she was fine. Saria suddenly turned to Will, which surprised the boy greatly. He remembered his past life. Wings appeared from the devil's body. After that, Teinbris hovered over the demon's body, looking at Will. In front of the hero stood a giant chimera. It was a white wolf with wings. It was looking at the young man. Will wondered if it could be Teinbris. Will could not believe that it was Teinbris. He strongly doubted it. The beast was small in stature and different in shape. Will assumed that they might be related. The wolf looked calmly at the boy. Will did not understand why it did not attack them. Will assumed that the wolf was afraid to approach him because he had a beast god or because he didn't want to fight him in principle. The wolf turned his attention to Rosetta. This horrified the beast woman. Not long ago he was a monster, but now he is so powerful that his strength cannot be compared to anyone else. Rosetta remembered Rose and closed her eyes. Will turned to Rosetta and Tina with serious intentions. Will ordered the girl to return to the academy immediately and ask for help, and he would try to detain him in the meantime. Rosetta, confused, said that it was too risky. Will replied that they were in danger and that he would be fine. Tina wanted to object to the young man, but Will interrupted her and asked her once again to run away and call for help as soon as possible. Tina remembered the past. He was afraid that she would not have time to do it. Rosetta took Tina on her shoulder and told her that they should listen to Will. Her attitude confused Tina. The girls went to the academy. Tina asked the young man not to die before they arrived. Will calmly replied that everything would be fine. He promised that he would return alive. Rosetta and Tina reluctantly fled from the battlefield. The young man held his special ring in his hands. He could contact Zenobia with the ring. However, he did not know how long he could hold out while they ran for help. Will activated the ring. He turned to Zenobia. The young man said that it was he who informed Zenobia that they were attacked by a beast and were now fighting it. His words surprised Zenobia. She did not understand what he was talking about. Will added that he thought it was Teinbris, the monster of disasters, or perhaps one of his children. Zenobia replied that they would come immediately and asked the young man to wait for them, as safety was paramount. Will replied that he had heard her words. Artie remembered the ring and the voice and assumed that she had heard the teacher. Will replied that he would tell them everything later, and for now they would focus on the enemy. Artie supported his words. She added that she would not let him fight alone. Will directed his hand to the girl's broken sword and began to use magic. Will knew that she was powerless against the monster of disasters and an ordinary sword would not help here, so she needed to be strengthened. This greatly surprised the girl. Artie looked at her new blade with delight. Will said that he made it in a hurry, but it would not fail in battle. Artie thanked him for the new sword. Teinbris stood before them. Will asked the girl if she was ready for battle and added that they should defeat him together. Artie agreed. Will prepared himself for battle and said that he could not escape from them now. The young man used the spell Deadly Blade, which attracted the wolf's attention. The magic was directed at the wolf, but it doubled and avoided the blow. This upset Artie a little, but Will was ready to use another spell. The young man placed his hand on the ground and activated the earth magic Hands of the Earth. Hands emerged from the soil and grabbed the wolf, which greatly surprised the monster. Immediately after that, a hail of arrows was aimed at the wolf. It was the spell Sharp Arrows. The wolf was immobilized, which made Artie happy. The chimera growled and gathered its strength. After that, all the arrows cracked. The hands from the earth were also destroyed. The wolf rushed towards the boy. Will realized that he had destroyed all the magic with one flap of his wings. The boy managed to use magic to block the monster's dash. The hero added that he would not allow even a scratch to be left on his body. While the wolf was leaning against Will's magic circle, the kid rammed it. Kiki's blow caused significant damage to the wolf. Will praised his pet. When the young man looked at Kiki, he saw a giant goat in front of him. Kiki's transformation surprised the boys greatly. After that, the slime covered the boys with its body. Artie and Will noted how big they had become. The slime and the goat rushed at the chimera. Will's pets gave the monster a strong rebuff. Their strength made Artie and Will happy. The young man said that with such strength the pets did not even need their help. The pressure of the pets angered the wolf and he roared, provoking them to attack each other. The pets fell to the ground, exhausted. Will didn't understand why the pets suddenly attacked each other. Artie rushed at the wolf. The girl screamed for the wolf not to touch her allies. The girl cut off 2 of the wolf's legs. The monster growled in anger and looked at the girl. Artie glanced at the monster and called him pathetic. After that, the girl was thrown back by the wolf's attack. Will ran up to the defeated Artie, who apologized for not seeing the attack. Will realized that the wolf had hit her with a mist spell, hoping that their magic wasn't cursed and that she would be okay. The young man understood that the enemy was strong and incredibly agile, so he had to come up with something, otherwise they would lose at this rate. The boy thought about using other magic. Will decided to combine the magic of water, air, and earth. He aimed the spell at the wolf at its face. The spell Water Trap deprived it of vision. The youth deliberately cast the spell at the wolf's face to deprive it of sight and hearing. The monster howled in rage. Will told the wolf that he shouldn't even try to remove this magic, even fog magic won't help him. He added that now his abilities are as strong as his. Water magic neutralizes, not letting your energy escape. Will realized that he had no choice but to use some special technique. Will directed the water from the spell deeper into the wolf. He said that he had been waiting for this for a long time. The wolf howled and foam poured out of its mouth. With the help of air magic, the pores penetrated the wolf's body, spreading poison. This will weaken the wolf and his body will no longer obey control. This spell will spread long and painfully, paralyzing every inch of the wolf's soul. Will asked the wolf what it was like to swallow his power. After that, the chimera spat out many powerful projectiles towards the young man. Some of the projectiles hit the hero. Will said that he could not put up much defense because of the control of another power. Will held on with all his might. He needed to hold on a little longer to reach its center. Then Artie pounced on the wolf from above. She delivered a sweeping blow to the wolf's mouth. The girl said that it would distract the wolf. Then Kiki crashed into the wolf's chest and the slime grabbed his paw and began to melt it into its body. Will realized that they had come to his aid together. They needed to hold on a little longer. In a moment, Will was able to reach the center of the wolf. The young man reached the center and intended to destroy the wolf's power. Will was able to hit the wolf and it fell to the ground dead. Will did not understand why he died. The hero said that he had reached its center, but he only wanted to destroy its power. He didn't think it would kill the beast because its skin was quite tough. Will realized that the duel with those stupid brothers had only benefited him. Will looked at his wounded ally and said that she needed urgent treatment. Artie asked if the wolf had put a curse on her. Will sat down in front of his comrade and began to use healing magic on her. Artie awkwardly said that his magic was very strong. Artie said that this beast was insanely strong and she couldn't defeat it even with a weapon. Will remembered Zenobia telling him in tears that she defeated a demon that had no arms or legs. Will sighed contentedly and thought that Zenobia had a worthy student. The young man stroked the girl's head and said that there was nothing to worry about. The main thing was that it was all over. He added that if she understood this, she would definitely become a strong warrior in the future. The girl listened to her partner in confusion. Artie felt very embarrassed by her companion's actions. After that, Will came to his senses. The young man realized that he remembered little Zenobia. Will hurriedly asked the girl about the condition of her sword. The girl answered sheepishly that her sword was slightly damaged. Artie said that she could control it easily and that its metal was very strong and light, and the shape of the sword was very comfortable, so she could hold it comfortably in her hands. She added that the sword had a beautiful pattern and strong magical power. After that, there was an awkward pause between the guys. Artie hesitantly wanted to ask Will something. The young man smiled and said that he was giving this sword to her. Kiki and the slime stood aside contentedly. Will was glad that it was all over. He exhaled and lay down on the grass. The young man said that he was terribly tired. Artie agreed with him. After that, the girl thanked the young man for his help. The wolf's body turned to ashes, leaving only the core. Artie asked if they were able to defeat him only because his weakness was water magic. Will answered in the negative. Will realized that the monster fought on equal terms and could withstand any of his techniques. It had no weak point. It was just something that was weak in its body, and they were able to attack it, dealing a fatal blow. Suddenly, wings appeared behind the heroes. These were two wyverns with teams of riders. Their appearance surprised the guys. Will did not understand where they could have appeared from. It was Zenobia and her comrade. Rosetta hurried Tina. Tina sighed tiredly and said that she could not keep up with her friend and asked her to take a little rest. Rosetta reminded her of that monster. She added that they needed to run as far as possible to find help and help their friends. The girl added in a rage that if they did not hurry, they would be killed. Tina was horrified by the thought of this. Suddenly, someone from the sky addressed the girls. Because of this, Tina said in tears that she heard them calling their names. The girls were addressed again. This time they looked up. Seeing their comrades in the sky, Tina and Rosetta were happy. After a while, the guys found themselves in the director's office. The man said that he would like to hear a detailed report on what happened to them in the forest. Zenobia pointed at the director and said that she forgot to introduce the old man to them and added that it was her mistake. Her words hurt the director. Zenobia added that the old man's name was Edel Milt and he was one of the directors and a very powerful magician. Edel answered with displeasure that she was older than him. Tina and Rosetta were horrified when they learned the director's name. Tina said that it was a great honor for them to meet him. Edel laughed and said that they could do without such formality. Milt added that he had heard a lot about Tina and that she and Artie had been recommended as Zenobia's best students. He then praised the girls. This praise greatly embarrassed Tina. Edel added that he had heard a lot about Rosetta, mentioning that Rosetta was an excellent hunter and such people were highly valued among them. His words confused Rosetta. Zenobia asked Rosetta and Tina to tell her what had happened. Will assumed that Zenobia wanted to find out how much the two of them had understood or learned. Rosetta mentioned a huge bear and Tina corrected her by saying that it was a terrible demon wolf. Tina and Rosetta talked about the damage to livestock in Rosetta's hometown, the demon story that still remains unsolved, and the appearance of Tinebris. Zenobia asked if she had spoken of Tinebris. Tina confirmed her words. Tina said that Will himself said his name when he saw this monster. This shocked the young man. Will awkwardly said that he wanted to tell about it. The mention of the powerful monster Tinebris shocked Edel and Zenobia. Will understood that in reality, the Beast of Calamity and Tinebris were not the monsters that other mages knew about. The Beast of Calamity was killed by him and his disciples, but he felt that some people, like the adventurers, knew about it. The Grand Master and his disciples defeated a powerful demon king who wanted to destroy humanity, and it seems that the Guardian army skillfully manipulated this information, carefully hiding it. Zenobia asked Edel what they should do next. Edel replied that she was the one giving the orders here, so the word was hers. Zenobia said wearily that they had no choice but to omit it and keep their expedition a secret, because each of them had signed an oath of secrecy. Will couldn't remember signing such papers. Zenobia added that everything they had just talked about would not go beyond the office, since they only needed to know about what had happened to them in the forest. Her words confused the girls. Tinebris and the Beast of Calamity are the names of the demon king who was once defeated by the Great Master and his disciples, and the bandits who attacked them at that time were his loyal followers. The rescue agency was created specifically to destroy and fight this cult, and not a single living soul knew what secrets the Guardians kept. Zenobia summed up that Tina had been told everything by her teacher. Will was glad that he didn't tell about the beast's resurrection and his true identity. Rosetta said that she was told about it too. She asked if she was special because of it. Zenobia replied that they needed someone with abilities like Rosetta's, so they went to her for help. Rosetta was very embarrassed and giggled. Zenobia noted that she looked insanely like Tina. Rosetta asked Zenobia what would happen to Artie and Will. Zenobia replied that they knew about it beforehand because they were students at their academy and heard that they needed help. Will laughed awkwardly. Tina said that because of these, Wills were so prepared for battle, and Rosetta added that they didn't even tell them everything. Will didn't know what to answer them. Zenobia said that now that they had figured everything out, she wanted to hear a detailed report from Will and Artie from the scene where the demon was killed. Artie agreed with her mentor's suggestion. The boys gave them a detailed report of what happened. Zenobia said it was interesting because they had hunted him before and had never seen anything like it. Edel and the elf sat with thoughtful expressions. Edel added that there have been cases where a person becomes a demon, but for someone already dead to become a demon, or for the original form of a demon to become a higher-ranking demon, this is the first time they have seen such a thing. The director added that he would have to think about it carefully. Zenobia said that her next suggestion might seem stupid. She asked the boys to stay here for a while and not go outside the building. Tina obediently agreed. Will understood that Zenobia and Edel were afraid and did not know what to do. Even though it was a high-ranking demon, only he and Artie knew its true form while the others were caught off guard. Will doesn't believe that they've gotten rid of the monster for good. Even if it happens that Tina doesn't inherit the throne, the Empire can't lose her as the crown princess. Edel called someone and asked how they could hear him. The director quickly left the table and apologized for what had happened. Edel walked away from the table and started a conversation on the magic line. After that, he turned to the boys and addressed Will and Rosetta. He said that he had an urgent task for them. Will asked the director what had happened. Edel suggested that they had enemies even worse than Tinebus on the horizon. This greatly surprised the children. Will wondered why only he and Rosetta were sent on this mission. Saria and Rosetta entered the room. The girls were very happy to see their relatives. Will and Rosetta took the babies in their arms. The teacher apologized for not being able to hold them. She added that the children were so worried that they asked to see them sooner. Will apologized for the trouble his sister had caused. Saria asked the young man in an offended tone if he was okay and added that she was very worried about him. Will replied that he was okay and apologized to his sister for making her worry. The young man added that only his clothes were slightly torn. This frightened Saria greatly. Will said in a friendly manner that he had gotten a little carried away when he was playing with the goat and the bear. His words offended Saria. She singled out that he was playing and not fighting. Will apologized again. The young man added that they now had a new family member, which greatly surprised the little one. Saria was delighted to see the goat. After a while, the young man returned to his room. Saria extended her hand in a friendly manner to the goat, whom she named Beliash, and asked him to give her a paw. Kiki placed his hoof on the girl's forehead and bleated. This made Will laugh. Saria tried to tame Kiki the second time and told him to look at her hand and repeat. Will noted that all their animals had divine powers. He remembered the dog he had tamed earlier. Will knew that Saria was crazy about them, and it seemed to him that she liked the goat too. He noticed the goat's new name, Beliash. Will realized that Kiki had also settled in and no longer seemed like a dangerous animal to him, although sometimes he continued to butt him in the leg. Someone knocked on the door and asked for permission to come in. The boy replied that Artie could come in. The girl entered the room and said that she and Will needed to hurry. She was very surprised to see the room's inhabitants. Artie noted the number of people in the room. Will responded that Saria thought they had too few animals. Will added that he needed to take her to the nursery. Artie responded that she would take them there. Will suggested that it could have been Zenobia's order and asked Artie not to worry and asked her to wait here. The girl replied that she wanted it herself and no one ordered her to do anything. Will said that in that case they should hurry, and Artie looked at him uncertainly. Some time ago, Will and Edel were sitting opposite each other. The director said that Will's magical power was unstable and weak because he was in the body of a small child. Edel added that he still did not understand how Will managed to split the core into two halves. Will replied that he too thought it was impossible, but thanks to the guy's help and Artie's distraction, he was able to focus and direct his power against the demon. The young man added that she saw how the power of water was negatively working on the demon, blocking its actions, but the beast of disaster was trying to redirect the energy to him to do something. Edel replied that they had no prior knowledge of the demon's weaknesses and had only speculated on the matter. Will asked if they could work through its actions and at least get an approximate idea of the disaster beast's strength. Will concluded that thanks to their squad they managed to find out something. Edel agreed. Edel said that he had one offer and 3 requests for the master. Will asked what he wanted from him. Edel's first request was for help in investigating the disaster monster and his minions. Will cheerfully replied that he was not against cooperation. Edel replied that the young man could use his office whenever he wanted. He added that the necessary papers and documents were kept here, so the work would be much easier. He would tell him later when they started the investigation. Will thanked him for the opportunity. Regarding the request, Edel said that he wanted Artie to be his teacher since he, like her, needed constant practice. Will replied that he was not against it since it would make moving around the school much freer. Will asked if no one would suspect him if he, the top student with divine beasts, were to train under a girl. Edel replied that in order to confirm divine beasts, it is necessary to determine the educational guidelines, and mere assumptions will not be enough, so there is no problem. Edel informed the teacher that he just needed to train hard to gain the necessary skills. There were many applicants who wanted to work with him. Will realized that it was quite reasonable for everyone to mistakenly perceive the results of measurements as their own abilities. Edel decided to move on to the second request. He needed to know something. Edel asked what Rosetta's abilities were as a potential hunter. Immediately after this question, Zenobia jumped onto his sofa and showed interest in the question. Will replied that she was a very good hunter and the way she found tracks of wild creatures was amazing. Will added that although she did not have much experience in combat, she handled the bow wonderfully and she also had a nice character. Zenobia listened cheerfully to the boy with a cup of tea in her hands. Edel summed up that they really made a great team of four, they just balance each other well using their strength. Will agreed with his words and added that he wanted to continue working with them. Edel sighed contentedly and said that he appreciated it. After that, the young man asked what the director's third request was, or was that all he wanted to know. Edel answered hesitantly that it was about Rosetta and her future stay here. Will asked what it was about. The director said that he wanted Rosetta to become Regina's student. He added that Regina had no equal in weaponry, she was an excellent archer and swordsman. Will replied that he understood this and asked what was wrong with that. Edel remained uncertainly silent. The headmaster replied that Regina did not take students. Will was a little surprised. Edel added that it would take a long time to tell the reason. Zenobia replied that everything was fine. Edel coughed, preparing to begin the story. This story happened 90 years ago, then she had one student. Regina loved and respected him very much, devoted all her free time to him. One day, her hometown and their country were attacked by demons. While Regina was protecting the people in her homeland, he protected the country by acting as a human shield and not letting the demon to the gates. After some time, she returned back and defeated the demon, but it was too late as the student received a mortal wound. After seeing Regina defeat the demon, he died with a smile on his face. She raised a truly strong student. Back then, on the day of that battle, he was there and saw everything with his own eyes, but the demons were too strong to fight alone. The enemies had deliberately planned for Regina to be absent while they dealt with her favorite student. After that, her only words were, "I will never take on any more students." Will listened attentively to Edel's story. He asked if he was sure that Rosetta could be trusted to her. After this question, Will asked what the problem was. The young man said that it was understandable, she had lost her favorite student. He reminded her that Edel also knew the confusion a person experiences when a comrade you fought alongside dies. Zenobia said that they had to do something to bring her back, as much time had passed since then. She added that the request was for Will to talk to her and ask her to take Rosetta as his apprentice. Then the boy understood why they told him this story. Will understood the grief of losing a beloved student. He himself had once been a master, so he understood her feelings better than anyone else. Will sighed tiredly and replied that he would talk to her. This made Edel happy. Will asked the director and Zenobia not to expect much from their conversation. Edel replied that the master's words would find a response in her heart. Will asked if Edel had told him everything. The director gave a positive answer and thanked the young man. Will decided to return to what they had discussed before this request. The young man said that he wanted to use his room for an investigation. His words surprised Edel greatly. The director acted very uncertainly, which caused Zenobia's displeasure. Zenobia asked Edel with displeasure if he wanted to clean his office first. The girl angrily said that the old man had so much junk that the master would not even find the papers he needed. Edel reacted emotionally to his friend's words. The man said that there were many useful things in his office that could not be thrown away. Edel and Zenobia looked at each other. Because of the girl's piercing gaze, Edel was forced to turn away. Will stood by the door upset and said he would contact them later. The young man remembered that in his past life he always said to keep everything organized. Will glared at Edel and told him to clean up his office and put all the necessary things away until he came back. Edel apologized hesitantly. The boy left the room and noticed Artie standing near the door. Will asked if he had been standing there all this time. The girl replied that he shouldn't worry because it was part of her assignment. Will sighed tiredly. Will asked Artie if she had a minute to spare. The goat and slime watched with interest. Will and Artie were sitting across from each other in the boy's room. Will reminded Artie that she didn't have to follow him around. The girl said no. Artie asked if it irritated the boy. The boy said it wasn't that. Will and Artie looked at each other awkwardly. As soon as the young man addressed the girl, she reacted strangely. Will said that he wanted to ask her something. Artie asked what the matter was. The hero asked why she was so desperate to get closer to him. He added that he was genuinely interested in knowing about it. Artie looked confused and said that it wasn't something he would have thought of. Will said that he hadn't thought of anything like that, he was just curious. Artie sheepishly said that she was very worried about Will. The hero assumed that these experiences were not accidental. He asked the girl if she knew who Tinebris was. He was sure that Zenobia had definitely told her about him. He reminded her that when the wolf attacked them, he was too engrossed to say anything about it. Artie awkwardly replied that she knew everything about him and that monster. Artie apologized for finding out his secret, which the young man had been keeping all this time. Will replied that she did not need to apologize because everything was fine. After that, the hero said that there was something else she did not know about him. Will clarified that he was talking about his real name. Artie hesitantly asked if Will was his real name. The young man solemnly replied that his real name was Edelphus Worms, that was his name in his past life. Artie hesitantly asked if he was the master. Will replied that she might not believe him, but other teachers could confirm it, as they had been his students in a past life. Artie thoughtfully said that he believed him. The girl added that she was very surprised by this, but felt that he was an unusual person. Will noted how quickly the girl believed his words. Artie replied that in the case of reincarnation in our time, they are very rare, but they exist and are even confirmed. She added that it was much rarer for a person to retain memories from their past life. Artie said hesitantly that an 8-year-old boy would not have been able to defeat the strongest mages or powerful monsters so easily. Therefore, it is logical that only a great master could handle them. Will hesitantly answered that he won only thanks to her help. After that, Artie asked if his animals were divine. The boy replied that he wanted to talk about that. Will added that a goddess had made him that way. In response, Artie suggested that he was a favorite of the gods. After that, Will told Artie how he had gone from his death to today. Artie concluded that the divine beasts, guardians, and half-breeds were all true. Will replied that ordinary animals could not have such power, so everything was obvious. The young man approached the girl and said that everything they had talked about was their secret and no one except her, Zenobia, and the other teachers knew about it. The girl replied that he should not worry because she would not tell anything. Artie asked why he decided to share all this with her. Will answered with a smile that he trusted her as he trusted himself. His answer surprised and slightly embarrassed the girl. Will added that even though she was one of the rescuers, he had seen her risk her life for him. Will looked at Artie seriously and said that he had one request to make of her. Artie was waiting to hear the young man's request. Will said he wanted her to fight the monster of disaster with him. He wanted a worthy man to stand by his side, fighting evil, just like he had 100 years ago. Artie was extremely unsure. The girl replied that, knowing his background, it would be a great honor for her to participate in battle alongside the great master. She added that she would do her best not to let him down. Will thanked Artie and said that he wanted her to continue to treat him as Will and not as a master. Artie agreed with Will and said that they would work well together. The young man asked the girl if she wanted to train with him today. Artie agreed and added that she would show him a couple of new moves. There was a knock on the young man's door. The voices from behind the door informed him that they had something to say to the hero. The voices sounded familiar to Will. Tina and Rosette entered the room. After a while, the boys were drinking tea together at the table. One of the girls asked if Will wanted them to join his squad. Will said that the girls were well trained, which he had already seen several times, both during the introductory exams and in the forest when they saved him. Tina replied that they trained every day and were constantly improving their skills. The girl asked why he was suddenly suggesting that they team up again. Tina added that she wasn't very strong in battle, so she was of little use. Rosetta said that she too was not in the physical form she could be in, and in their last mission they had to run for help, so they were unable to help them. Will knew that they would quickly agree to his proposal. Will approached the girls and told them that he wanted to do something. The hero said that he wanted to team up with them so that in the future they could defeat the monster of disaster and other demons. He added that to do this, they must constantly train to improve their skills and magic. His words puzzled the girls. Rosetta clarified that the young man wanted to gather them all to kill him together. Will confirmed her words. Will said that even if they don't have time to get together and train together, the school classes will be enough to gain knowledge and improve their tactics. He added that Tina is Dion's student, so she is in good hands. Will was a little confused. It wasn't that he didn't trust them, but unlike Artie, Tina and Rosetta were academy students who weren't yet affiliated with the Salvation Army. Tina was a princess and Rosetta had a sister. During the battle with the Beast of Disaster, something might happen to them. Tina remained silent, uncertain. She gathered her strength and said that she was not strong enough to fight. Tina added that she often gets scared and runs away, hiding in the bushes, and is simply useless in battles. She cannot forgive herself for this. The girl confidently said that this time she wants to overcome her fears and help Will fight the monster. Tina said that she wanted to take a risk and prove to herself that she was strong and could stand up for her friends, protecting them from the monster of disaster. Rosetta added that she thought exactly the same as Tina, so she would agree with every word she said. The huntress stated that she wanted to help Will and fight side by side against the demon, because if they invaded their lands, innocent people could get hurt, and if something happened to her sister, she would never forgive herself. The girl confidently said that for this reason she wanted to become stronger and protect not only Rose but also Will. After all, they were friends, which meant they had to help each other. Their enthusiasm surprised the young man. Will stood up and apologized for pressuring them with his requests. He added that he was pleased that they had decided to help and support him. The young man extended his hand to the table and said that he would ask it again, even though he knew the answer. The young man asked the boys if they would join forces with him to fight the Beast of Disasters. The boys unanimously placed their hands on Will's palm and gave a positive answer. Will said contentedly that they could begin training right away. The girls supported his proposal. All this brought back old memories to him when his students as children also stood next to him. Will was very happy about this. The young man happily declared that they should first try to defeat him using only hand-to-hand combat and suggested that they attack. This greatly surprised his companions. At this time, Regina finished killing demons in some room and was about to return home. She was seriously determined to teach a lesson to the boy who decided to pose as a master. After some time, the boys come to the shooting range. The arrow hits the target exactly in the center. This arrow was shot by Rosetta, and Will reported that it hit the target exactly. Will approached the girl and said that she moved with such ease as if the magical weight did not exist. Rosetta thanked the young man for the praise and told him that she had learned it from him. During the week of joint training, the girls practiced day after day using Will's training method, which he had developed in the worm's house. Magical energy constantly circulates through the body, and during this exercise they direct it in the opposite direction, thus strengthening the muscles of the body and the magical channels, at the same time improving their control over magic. Tina came out next. She charged the targets with magical energy and hit the center of all 3 targets. The girl was happy about hitting the targets and asked Will if he saw it. The young man answered positively and praised the girl. Artie decided to go next. She made a dash towards the targets and cut 2 targets into several small pieces. Will praised Artie, saying that she wielded the sword perfectly. Will said they were a little clumsy at first, but they were now completely used to the magical weight. Artie said she didn't feel the weight at all now. Rosetta approached the young man and said that her allies were amazing. Their movements were much better than hers. Will replied that she should not belittle herself because she learned very quickly. He added that they were students of the sages, so they had an advantage. Will told Rosette that she was in no hurry. The girl doubted whether this was true. After that, he approached Tina and told her that she was making progress in controlling magic. Her firepower and shooting accuracy had noticeably increased. His words made the sorceress happy. Tina asked Will if she could use recovery magic like him if she continued in the same spirit. Will gave a positive answer. Artie approached the young man and asked if she could become as skilled as he was in close combat. Will confidently confirmed her words. Will told the girl that she had already been able to handle magic very well, and if she trained even harder, she would even be able to strengthen her body by controlling the flow of magic. Artie replied that she would try to do everything possible for this. Will asked the girl if she liked her new sword. He added that the length and weight of the blade could be adjusted as desired. Artie pulled the sword out of its sheath and said that it was excellent work. The sword seemed to be an extension of her hand. Will said that her old sword, which he had borrowed to slay the demon bear, was also easy to use. Artie replied that she was glad that she liked it. Will noticed that the sword was hastily made and was not very durable, so it quickly became dull. For this reason, he is proud of this work. Will added that the sword was a bit crude. The small details were not paid attention to, focusing only on sharpness. This time he carefully selected the materials for its manufacture. It took almost 3 days to create, but it turned out excellent. The length of the handle is designed in such a way that it fits comfortably in the hand, both as a two-handed and as a one-handed sword. Artie replied that she immediately realized that this sword was a pearl of its kind. She added that a sword of such a level must be made of a rare material and asked Will where he was able to get it. The young man hesitantly replied that someone was kind enough to help him. Artie concluded that it was a legendary sword. This sword was made by Edelphas, the materials were provided by the sage Milt, and the management was taken over by Zenobia. Will said that she would no longer need the old sword. The girl replied that she was somehow sad to part with it. She noted that they had not been together long with the tail-cutting sword. The boy was surprised that the girl had given it a name. Artie asked Will if he was carrying a dagger. Will replied that she had a diamond eye and added that he was armed too. This dagger was hidden under the boy's jacket. Will said that he was practicing his hand before making a sword for her. Before his reincarnation, he was more powerful in magic than in swordplay, but now she is a helpless 8-year-old and it wouldn't hurt to have a weapon on her. Will added that the dagger was very cool and suggested that Rosetta and the girls would want one for themselves. He concluded that he preferred being a blacksmith to being a mage. Artie suggested that the legendary sage was the owner of the forge. Artie pondered what to name the sword. She considered Demon King Slayer and Sage Sword. Will realized she was serious about naming the weapon. Rosetta said she was following Artie around. The girl wondered if she would ever catch up with them. Sometime later, the day of classes arrived. A joyful Tina greeted Will. The girl ran up to Will and Rosetta and said that classes would start soon. Rosetta replied that she was also looking forward to the start of school. Will realized that they had both read the schedule of lessons until they were tattered. He remembered how the girls had discussed their first lessons. Tina asked the young man what class he needed to go to. She stunned Will with this question. The guy answered hesitantly that he had decided to just take the exams at the end of the semester. This answer greatly surprised the girls. Tina sadly asked Will if he would go to class with them. Rosetta sadly added that they had been waiting for this for a long time. Their words made Will feel guilty. Will said that he and Artie had been through a lot. Artie preferred to teach at home. Rosetta thought that there were more important things than studying at the academy. She suggested that the person confronting the beast of disaster must have a special talent. She doubted that she could reach the same level. After some time, Will, accompanied by Kiki and the slime, arrived at the principal's office. He knocked on the door and Edel allowed him to enter. The goat rushed into the office, which confused the boy. Entering the room, Will noticed 2 people sitting in front of him. A girl in official clothes asked the young man if he was Will Worms. Will confirmed her words and added that he and Regina had not seen each other for a long time. Regina jumped up and shouted that the young man should not pretend because she was seeing him for the first time. Will replied that she was still as small as ever. His answer surprised Regina. Regina told the hero to shut up. A large lizard's hand blocked her path to Will. The lizard said that he had heard from Milt and Zenobia about his reincarnation. Will told Dion that he was a giant like him. The young man asked if he had grown in the last 100 years. Will recalled that 100 years ago he was 2 meters tall. Dion cheerfully replied that with the passage of time everyone changes. Will happily agreed with his student and added that he remembered him as before. Regina shouted at Dion not to get close to the master. Regina immediately approached the young man and grabbed him by the collar. She said in a rage that he could lead Zenobia and Milt by the nose, but he would not fool her. This turn of events frightened those present in the room. Kiki and the slime intended to attack the girl, but Will stopped them, saying that she was a friend. Regina angrily asked if he was going to continue posing as a master. Will replied that he was their master. Regina told him to prove it to her. Will quickly agreed. The young man asked Regina if she remembered the promise she had made to him as a child. Regina was slightly embarrassed when she heard about the promise. Will remembered Regina in tears, promising him that she would become strong. The boy said that she had given him her word to take proper care of her weapon. Regina, furious, asked the boy what happened. Will replied that she was 5 years old at the time. After that, Will added that she had sneaked into his lab out of curiosity and, seeing the stuffed animals, had gotten scared and burst into tears. The girl's face had turned red. Regina had shouted that the master had promised to keep it a secret. Will added that this did not prove anything and began to talk about Zenobia's sword. He did not have time to finish because Regina told him to shut up. Zenobia was surprised that the conversation turned to her sword. After that, Regina hugged the young man tightly and cried. Will began to calm his student. Zenobia asked the master what Regina had done with her sword. Will could not answer because of Regina's loud crying. The girl said that she missed the master very much. Will and Dion shook hands. The lizard said that he was very glad to see them. Will responded in kind. Will turned his attention to Dion and asked if he should tell him another old story to convince him too. The lizard replied that he had no doubt from the start that he was their master. Edel noted how cleverly Dion had gotten out of it. Dion added that it was just a premonition. Regina happily asked if he would tell her, now that they had finally met, what had happened to him for the last 100 years. Will asked if she had heard his story from Zenobia. Zenobia replied that she had not told them anything because she thought they would want to hear the story firsthand. Regina embraced the master again and said that she wanted to hear how he had defeated Tinebris. She asked the young man to tell her more about it. Will wearily agreed and suggested that they sit down on the sofa. This made Regina very happy. The girl led the young man along with her. A few seconds later, Regina and Will were sitting together on the couch. The girl was hugging the boy tightly, which embarrassed the latter. The boy asked what Regina was doing. The girl replied that he would grow up soon anyway, so she wanted to cuddle their master while he was still small. Edel and Zenobia thought this was strange, but will let her continue. After that, the hero told Regina and Dion the story of what happened after his reincarnation. After listening to the story, Willa Regina angrily said that she would not forgive them for mocking the master. She intended to destroy the Vor's family. Will replied that as long as they did not harm others, they could be ignored and she should not worry about him. Regina humbly accepted the master's instructions. Dion told Regina that those with power must be restrained. Regina grumbled that she knew about it. Will noted that Dion still united them all. He remembered that all his students came to him as children, and he raised Dion from an egg, and since he is his first student and the eldest among the others, he always unites everyone together. Regina looked at Zenobia and Edel and cheerfully clarified that they had caused Dion a lot of trouble. Dion, confused, replied that he had simply done everything he could. Regina's questions stunned both Dion and Edel and Zenobia. Will praised Dion, which confused the student. Will noticed that Dion had worked hard in his absence and thanked the lizard. Tears appeared in Dion's eyes and he apologized for getting emotional. Will replied that he could let it go. Bellyash climbed onto the couch and started licking Dion's face. Will angrily told Kiki that he couldn't do that. The boy apologized to Dion and said that Kiki was still a kid. Dion replied that it was nothing because Bellyash was a sweet child. After that, the goat climbed onto the lizard's head. Will angrily shouted that this did not mean that he could be allowed to sit on the head. Dion replied that everything was fine. Edel decided to move on to their next steps. He asked Will how his meeting with Tina and the team went. Will replied that he was doing well and that they had already started training, and he also told them that he intended to finish off the Beast of Calamity and they supported him. Edel asked if the girls had revealed the master's true identity. Will replied that he had only confessed to Artie. The young man suggested that, compared to Artie, Tina was not ready for it yet. It was unlikely that they were underprepared at that moment, but the girls were on a completely different level than Artie, who had joined the rescue team. If they had found out everything, he would have had to leave. Dion thanked them for their understanding. Edel approached Regina, informing her that among the students under the master's ward was a hunter named Rosetta. Regina replied that she had heard the name before in conversation. She assumed that Rosetta had shown herself during the demon hunt. Edel suggested that Regina take Rosetta as her apprentice. This question slightly surprised the girl. Regina awkwardly said that Edel had brought up the topic again. The girl added that she was not suitable for this role and Milt would be more suitable as a teacher. Edel replied that the thing was that he was already listed as the master's teacher, at least on paper. This greatly surprised the girl. He added that she was the only one who had not taken on a student. His words upset the girl. Will knew that even though Milt was only a pretend master, taking on Rosetta as a second apprentice would be an additional burden on him. He noted how perceptive Regina could be. Will assumed that this was the atmosphere in which the Council of the Sages had been held for the last 100 years, and as their teacher, he was pleased to observe this. Dion agreed with Regina, which pleased the girl and discouraged Edel. Dion added that he also thought she should take an apprentice. Regina was upset by the lizard's opinion. Will realized that this issue had been raised more than once. Regina said that she was not the one to take an apprentice. The girl asked the master what he thought about it. Will replied that he didn't see a problem with it. Regina asked if she could have an apprentice. Will said that he thought Regina was very strong. The girl replied that she was still weak. Dion added that if she wasn't ready, then neither were they. His words confused Regina and she asked her friend not to say that. Regina asked what would happen if she brought trouble upon her student again. Will replied that they would do everything possible to prevent that from happening. Will suggested that the thought that Regina could not do anything then was constantly tormenting the girl. He added that it was better for her to invest her soul in another student now. Regina replied that she wasn't sure she could do it. She was afraid she wasn't ready for it yet. Will assured the girl that she could do it. He added that he knew what he was talking about because he raised her. He asked the girl to trust him. Regina let go of the master and stood up. She confidently said that it was time for her to take on an apprentice. Edel was very happy with her decision. Regina pointed her finger at him sheepishly and said that she would make the final decision after she met Rosetta and saw what kind of person she was. Edel replied that it was her right. He added that he would take her to her right now, but she was still in class. Regina confidently said that she needed to prepare, so it would be better to do it tomorrow. Her words confused Edel. Regina stood in front of the door and said that she was looking forward to meeting Rosetta. After a while, the girls' lessons ended. Rosetta and Tina met in the hallway. Tina cheerfully ran up to her friend and suggested that they practice together. Rosetta awkwardly apologized and said that she had some things to do. This upset Tina. Rosetta suggested that they practice tomorrow. Tina cheerfully agreed to her proposal. Rosetta decided that if she didn't try her best, she wouldn't drag everyone down. The 4 kids were standing in front of the principal's office. Rosetta said that she was very nervous before meeting the principal. Artie said that one day she would get used to it. Will held the kid in his arms and told Bellyash that he had started to misbehave when he stopped staying at home. Artie knocked on the door and said that the director herself had invited them. Zenobia smiled at the children and said that she was glad to see them all and that she was glad that they had all come. Rosetta asked if the director was glad to see them all. Zenobia said that they could come in. When the boys entered the office, they were all very surprised. Regina said that they were going to destroy the monster of disaster, for which Hiyashiko thanks them. The girl added that it was she who occupied this place in the Council of Sages. Regina stood there, clad in armor and holding a large halberd. She solemnly announced that the hero Regina Idru Gracia was here. Her presence greatly unsettled Tina and Rosetta. Regina added that she was willing to accept a new rank as long as she could kill. After that, she asked if they had any future plans for Hiyashiko. Will tried his best to hold back his laughter. He knew that Regina was sorely mistaken. Tina politely introduced herself as Tina Dea Imarud. Will noted that she greeted him with all the proper etiquette as one would expect from the emperor's daughter. Regina looked at the girl thoughtfully. She addressed Tina, calling her Dion's student. She said that she would do her best for her and asked if there were any orders. Tina thanked Regina in confusion. Regina looked at Rosetta. The girl greeted her awkwardly but politely. Regina couldn't believe her eyes. Will was struggling to contain his laughter. He knew that Regina's night was overwhelmed with laughter. The mask had a voice changer. Will wondered where Artie got such a serious expression. He was the only one careless enough. Artie's eyes looked into the distance so as not to be seen for as long as possible. Artie was shaking with uncertainty. Regina said that was very rude. Regina said that Vinovia had actually recommended that Rosetta be her apprentice. Her words greatly embarrassed the girl. Regina said that it would be an honor for her to teach a girl with such talent. Rosetta began to refuse. Regina lit up, seeing the girl's confused look. Rosetta, confused, began to say that it was a mistake. The girl said hesitantly that Regina was wrong because someone like her could not be Regina's student. Regina listened attentively to the girl's speech. She understood that she had not made a weapon out of her student. Regina said that it didn't look as bad as the teachers and students had said. These words shocked Rosetta. Regina corrected herself by saying that she actually wouldn't mind taking her in. Regina started to leave the principal's office. She said that she knew why the student had lost his spirit. She asked her to think about it calmly. The knight left the room waving goodbye to the boys. Her words gave hope to Rosetta. Will and Artie were holding back their laughter with all their might, standing behind the girl. Tina noticed their state. Zenobia smiled and said that she was pleasantly surprised by Rosetta. Her words surprised the girl. Zenobia reminded them that Will had said that he had some tea and sweets. She added that Belyashek and Furfuru had already arrived. Will sighed wearily. The boys sat down at the table to drink tea with sweets. Rosetta asked why the director had recommended her. Rosetta was confused. She wondered if Rabita had decided to subdue the monster of disaster. Rosetta added that she was useless and that everyone's power was growing here. Zenobia replied that in that case she assumed that Regina's student had the best. Rosetta awkwardly replied that the hero student had become possible. She added that she also had 2 warrior deities. Zenobia replied that her power did not come from the blessings of the deities. She asked if Will had fled from the battlefield with one of the demon families. Rosetta hesitantly confirmed her words. Will realized that he was being put forward as a witness, already making him nervous. Zenobia said that Rabita had become an excellent student. She added that true strength and talent are received differently in each person. She stroked Kiki and Furfura, who stood next to her. Zenobia said that Regina was waiting for an opportunity to make Rabita her apprentice. Zenobia said she would find out the details soon and to tell the truth, even if she had no talent, she had outdone herself in the test. Will wondered if Zenobia was saying that she had made many mistakes in the test. Zenobia added that she could also say for sure that Resita had no faults. She advised the girl not to rush and to think things over first and then decide. Resita cheerfully agreed. Tina angrily noticed that Belyashek had gotten to the director's sweets. Will said that Belyash was a very greedy boy. Rosetta sat in confusion. Sometime later in Will's room, Saria and Rosa were sleeping in an embrace. Will asked Rosette what she was worried about. Tina said that it would be great if she became a student. Artie agreed with her words. Rosette replied that she was still thinking about those beautiful words. Rosetta added that if Will had the talent level, a job probably wouldn't help her. Tina said she didn't know what to do. Will suggested she talk to the students. Rosetta asked if she had ever told Tina that she was not going to become an apprentice. Her reminder surprised the sorceress. Tina replied that it was the same with Rosetta now. She felt guilty. Tina and Artie remembered the morning workout from Zenobia. The director made them run because Dion was in the organization, but that didn't stop him from preparing a workout for Zenobia. Tina asked Artie what she was doing there. Artie thought about it and replied that her father was originally under the tutor's protection, but when she was 3, her father died, and at 5, the tutor replaced her parents. Her words greatly surprised Rosetta. Artie added that she had been training a lot with swords since then. Rosetta reacted uncertainly to her words. Will realized that Artie had liked to train with swords before and then with Zenobia. Previously, it took a huge price to obtain the divine sword. If they fought against a monster that destroyed everything and a religious organization when they had no weak points, they would not be able to win. Tina asked Will how it was. Will said that together with Rosette they would fight the dangerous monster. Will said with confidence that this would happen. Rosette agreed, confused. After that, the young man added that they would return back today. His words greatly surprised Rosette. Rosetta asked Will hesitantly if she had been helpful. Will replied that she was mistaken, as nothing of the sort had been mentioned in the plan. Will said that the students who entered were turning around and around, so he thought that she should ask him. He added that he and Tina were not yet ready to face really strong opponents. Rosetta listened attentively to her ally's advice. His guess that Will and Artie had fought the enemies harder was confirmed. Rosetta admitted that she had lied when she said that death was not scary. She added that fear is a test for each of us. While training, she constantly compares herself with others, and so her self-confidence quickly disappears. Rosetta began to cry. She said that she would not be able to live up to their expectations. Tina supported her friend. Rosetta began to apologize. Will assumed that Rosetta was very unhappy. Seriously speaking, kindness causes a lot of problems for people. They become obliged to move mountains, and it is hard to realize this. Will approached the tearful Rosetta and took her by the shoulders. He asked the girl to listen to him. Rosetta was very embarrassed when Will got closer to her. The young man told his partner that it was important for her not to lose hope. His words greatly upset Rosetta. Tina looked at her friend with disapproval, and Artie said that from today on she would not speak to him. Will became embarrassed and hastily said that they had misunderstood everything. He supposed it would be better to tell her directly. Will looked at the hurt Rosette and said that he believed she had talent, but he felt that her true power had not yet fully awakened. Will confidently added that it was natural for Rosetta to be afraid of making mistakes, and when the time came and she would have to fight the family of that monster, he would tell her about it. The young man added that she was a strong person, even though she was at the beginning of her journey. The hero said that she herself could become an excellent student. After that, he added that if Mrs. Zenobia felt that the strengths of his students were different, then they would have to be given the same workload. This truth slightly surprised Rosetta. The director recommended that Regina take the test. It took a lot of effort to pass it, but she still got a good result. And yet, out of 10,000, there was only one mistake. At this time, Regina was breathing out tiredly near Edel. Will added that if she succeeded, then Regina's wish is to become stronger. The young man concluded that Rosetta just needs to be confident in her powers. His words greatly pleased the girl. The beastwoman's ears perked up with happiness. Rosetta confidently declared that she would pass the test that Mrs. Regina had given. Her determination made the boys happy. Tina said that they would definitely help her. Rosetta happily thanked her comrades. Tina said that in this case it would be more fun with company. Her words confused Rosetta and she asked her friend to wait. Will added that in this case Rosetta would cope. Artie supported the young man's words. After some time, the boys came to Regina. Seeing them, the knight laughed and asked Rosetta if she was ready. The girl confidently said that she was ready and asked Regina to take her exam. Regina exhaled and noted that she had indeed prepared. Her words made Will laugh and he turned away. Regina mockingly asked Will why he would not participate in her exam, pointing out the young man's health. The girl informed the director that she would make sure there was always tea in her cup today. The director thanked Artie. Will noticed that the director was already sitting at the table. He hoped that she would not notice how Regina was behaving. The knight asked the young man to confirm her words. Will asked Regina if she was afraid. The girl exhaled in panic. Will decided to remind her that someone had been very childish in their time. He reminded her of Zenobia's sword. This reminder devastated Regina. The knight rushed away. Regina quickly decided to explain the gist of the test. She added that she would explain it once so they should listen carefully. The examiner's behavior aroused the director of the academy's suspicion. Regina continued by saying that the girl's task was simple. The girl said that in the dungeon, having reached the very depths, Rosetta would have to show her skills. Rosetta was very surprised when she learned the essence of the task. She asked if she would go alone and reminded her that the role of a scout is to protect the team. The girl, having rushed about in confusion, decided that it would be better for her to go alone. She said that they would go to the dungeon as soon as they got permission from the teacher, and then inside the dungeon she would decide what to do. The headmistress nodded her head approvingly. The difficulty for the girl was that she had never descended so low before, so she would have to try hard. Regina looked out the window. She noticed that the lessons had already started and added that she would rest tomorrow morning. Will looked sadly at the knight. He thought it would be better for her to hurry to the dungeon. The young man turned to Regita. The examiner was all attention and asked the young man what was the matter. Will replied that he wanted to take custody of his younger sister until the exam was over. Regina said that they still had time. Zenobia stood up from her chair and said that the children had been sitting at home for too long before leaving, and they needed to visit them. Will and Rosetta thanked the academy director. Zenobia added that now that they had time, they could go train. She told Tina that she would go with them, which greatly surprised and slightly upset the latter. Saria asked Will if he was busy today. Her brother replied that he had things to do today, but that he was not busy right now. Will calmly added that he would have to come back in 2 days next time. Rosetta apologized to her sister. Saria and Rosa looked at each other. Rosa said that there was no problem. Saria supported her and added that they also had a big deal and asked them to stay cheerful. Will patted his sister on the head and apologized. He added that she was already thinking like an adult. Saria replied that everything was fine because she and Rose thought that her brother would succeed. Rose confirmed her words. Will noted the girl's trust and said that in that case he would entrust Saria with the care of Rose. Saria happily confirmed his words. The young man's pet began to sniff its owner. The warrior said that Renren wanted to be with them too. Will said that he didn't mind. She added that Renren was popular with the children and that he was very helpful to them. Will laughed and remarked on the dog's large size. Saria added that the teacher's mood even improved. This made Will laugh and confused the teacher. The children said goodbye to the little ones. Rosetta noticed that there was someone in the room nearby. They entered the room where Tina and Zenobia were. The director said that they had prepared something for the girl. The girl became interested. There was equipment for the dungeon on the table. Zenobia said that these tools would be needed for research. It would take her a long time to get to the right place. There would be no shops to buy what she needed, so she had to choose everything she needed. Will hoped that Tina and Rosetta would choose their equipment wisely. Tina finished her selection quickly, which hurried her partner. Zenobia said that they still had time. The boys approached the assembly very clumsily. Soon they came to the hangar with the wyverns. The footman said that they could help at any time. Zenobia praised the footman. Will was surprised by the separate hangar. Zenobia said that Tina would go with Rosetta and Will with Artie. A wyvern came up to Will. It began to fawn over the boy. Will asked the wyvern for permission to ride it. The boy jumped on the monster and held out his hand to Artie. Artie hugged the boy and smiled. Will asked why she did that. In response, the girl said that he shouldn't worry about it. Artie said that the director used to ride her on a horse. Will replied that he couldn't forget it because he had already imagined the picture. The guys set off, which surprised Artie. The squad set off on the wyvern.